Blood trickled from her thigh onto the asphalt like a silent indictment. Her white wedding dress was now just a soaking wet piece of cloth, heavy as dead promises. Kiara O'Connor took one last step down this road with trembling legs. She didn't know what she was running from or toward, but she knew one thing. The girl who had gotten into Pierce Gallagher's car 3 weeks ago no longer existed. If you want to know what she lost to gain it all, follow this story to the end. And don't forget to like and comment the city you're watching from so I know how far this story has progressed. The rain came down like nails on tin that night, sharp and relentless, drumming against the greenhouse roof where Kiara Finley crouched between rows of night-blooming jasmine. Her father had sent her to check the temperature gauge an hour ago, but she'd stayed longer than necessary because the greenhouse was warm and the cottage they shared near the estate's north gate was not. 19 years old, and she still couldn't afford to keep the heat running through the night. Peter Finley's salary as head gardener for the Gallagher estate covered food and rent, barely, but luxuries like warmth in November were negotiable. She pressed her palm against the fogged glass and watched the main house through the distortion. Every window blazed with light. The Gallaghers were entertaining tonight. Black cars lined the circular drive like beetles congregating around something dead. She'd learned to recognize the patterns. Wednesday nights meant business. The kind of business that made men speak in low voices and leave their phones in the hallway. Kiara pulled her hand back and wiped the moisture on her jeans. She didn't belong up there in that world of crystal and cocaine white powder on marble countertops. She belonged here among the begonias and soil, invisible as dirt itself. That's what she told herself anyway. She was reaching for the thermostat dial when she heard the gunshot. Not loud, not like the movies, just a flat crack that cut through the rain's static like a branch snapping underfoot. Her body went rigid, hand frozen mid-reach. Another shot followed. Then silence so complete it felt like the whole estate was holding its breath. Kiara's heart kicked against her ribs. She should stay put, should mind her own goddamn business like she'd done for 19 years. But her feet were already moving toward the greenhouse door, propelled by something ancient and stupid. The same impulse that makes people slow down at car accidents. The rain hit her face like a slap. She ran across the lawn, keeping low, her sneakers squelching in mud. The south garden gate stood open, swinging slightly in the wind. Beyond it, the reflecting pool stretched out like a sheet of hammered pewter, and beside it, a body. Face down in the grass, one arm extended toward the water, as if reaching for something just out of grasp. Dark suit, expensive shoes. A bloom of red spreading across the back of his white shirt, diluting in the rain. Kiara's stomach turned over. She took 3 steps forward before survival instinct kicked in and rooted her in place. Don't touch anything. Don't be seen. Turn around and run back to the greenhouse and pretend you were checking the goddamn jasmine all along. But she couldn't move. Because beyond the body, near the pool house, she saw him. Pierce Gallagher. He stood in the rain like it wasn't happening. Dark hair plastered to his skull, expensive shirt clinging to his shoulders. He held a gun loosely at his side, not brandishing it, not hiding it, just holding it like a man holds his car keys. And he was looking directly at her. Kiara's breath stopped. She'd seen Pierce Gallagher hundreds of times over the years, watched him grow from a cold-eyed teenager into something sharper and more dangerous. He was 25 now, his father's heir, the future of whatever empire Crispin Gallagher had built from Dublin's broken bones. She'd passed him on the estate paths, served coffee once when the regular staff was short-handed, stood in the same room while he discussed irrigation systems with her father as if she were furniture. He'd never looked at her, not once. Not really. Until now. For 3 seconds they stared at each other across the rain-soaked garden. Then Pierce moved. Not toward her. Toward the pool house. He disappeared inside and the night swallowed him whole. Kiara ran, her lungs burned, her feet slipped in the mud. She didn't stop until she was back in the greenhouse, door closed, chest heaving. She sank onto a wooden workbench and pressed her palms against her thighs to stop them shaking. Someone was dead. Pierce Gallagher had killed someone, and he'd seen her see it. The smart thing would be to pack a bag and disappear before sunrise. Get on a bus to Cork or Galway, or anywhere the Gallagher name didn't reach. But even as she thought it, she knew it was fantasy. People like the Gallaghers had long arms. If Pierce wanted her gone, she'd be gone. If he wanted her dead, she'd be dead. She waited. Minutes stretched like taffy. The rain kept falling. When the greenhouse door finally opened, she nearly screamed. But it wasn't Pierce, it was Marcus, Crispin Gallagher's head of security. 6'4" and built like a brick shithouse, with a scar running through his left eyebrow that made him look perpetually skeptical. He stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his jacket, and looked at her the way you'd look at a stray dog you were deciding whether to feed or shoot. "Kiara Finley," he said. Not a question. She nodded, her throat had closed up. "You were in here all night?" Another nod. Marcus stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The greenhouse suddenly felt very small. "You see anything unusual? Hear anything?" Every instinct screamed at her to lie, but her voice came out steady, almost bored. "Just rain. Been working on the temperature controls. They've been acting up." Marcus studied her for a long moment. His eyes were the color of cigarette ash. Then he smiled, barely, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth, and she realized with cold certainty that he knew she was lying. "Good," he said. "Keep it that way." He left without another word. Kiara sat in the greenhouse until dawn, watching the main house through the glass. She saw men carrying something large and wrapped in plastic sheeting to one of the black cars, saw the vehicles pull away one by one like a funeral procession, saw the lights in the main house finally go dark. She didn't see Pierce again that night, but 3 days later, he came for her. She was working in this rose garden when the black Bentley pulled up, sleek and obscene against the autumn landscape. Kiara didn't look up. She kept her hands busy with the pruning shears, cutting away dead growth with more force than necessary. Maybe if she stayed focused on the thorns, he'd leave. Maybe he'd decide she wasn't worth the trouble. The car door opened. Expensive shoes crunched on gravel. Kiara. Her name in his mouth sounded wrong, too intimate, too deliberate. She set down the shears and straightened, wiping dirt from her palms onto her jeans. When she finally looked at him, the autumn sun was behind his head, turning him into a dark silhouette with edges of gold. "Mr. Gallagher." "Pierce." He stepped closer. "We need to talk." "I'm working." "I know. I'm interrupting. Get in the car." It wasn't a request. Kiara felt her spine stiffen. "I didn't see anything." "I know that too. Get in the car anyway." She should refuse, should stand her ground, should do literally anything other than what every cell in her body was screaming at her to do. But Pierce Gallagher wasn't the kind of man you said no to, and they both knew it. She glanced toward the cottage where her father was probably making lunch, oblivious. Then she followed Pierce to the Bentley. The interior smelled like leather and something else, cologne maybe, or just money. She sat stiffly in the passenger seat while Pierce slid behind the wheel. He didn't start the engine, just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at the windshield like he was trying to solve a complicated equation. "You're scared of me," he said finally. "Yes." He turned to look at her then, and Kiara forced herself not to flinch. Up close, Pierce Gallagher was almost obscene in his beauty, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers, sharp cheekbones, and a mouth that suggested cruelty and indulgence in equal measure. But it was his eyes that unsettled her most, gray-green like seawater, and just as cold. "You shouldn't be," he said. "You killed someone. I protected my family." He said it like he was discussing the weather. "There's a difference." "Not from where I was standing." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Most people don't talk to me like that. Most people don't watch you commit murder." Pierce laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was low and genuine and completely unexpected. "Christ, you've got a mouth on you." "I thought you wanted me to stay quiet." "I do. But I also want you to understand something." He shifted in his seat to face her fully. "What you saw that night, it's not what you think. The man in the garden, he was going to kill my father. I stopped him. That's all. By shooting him in the back? By doing what needed to be done." Pierce's voice hardened. "You want me to apologize?" "I won't. But I will make sure you're protected. Marcus told me you were smart enough to keep your mouth shut. I'm here to make sure you stay that way." Kiara's hands curled into fists in her lap. "So what, you're threatening me?" "I'm offering you a choice." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, thick with cash. "Take this. Quit working for my father. Move to Dublin. Start over somewhere the past can't touch you." She stared at the envelope like it might bite her. And if I don't, then you stay. Keep working in the gardens. Pretend none of this happened. He paused. But you stay visible, where I can see you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Kiara looked at the envelope, then at Pierce's face, then at the main house visible through the windshield. Her whole life lived in the margins of this estate, small and safe and suffocating. The money in that envelope could buy her freedom, could give her a future that didn't smell like fertilizer and fear, but it would also mean running, and something stubborn in her chest refused to run from this man or his world. I'm staying, she said. Pierce's eyes narrowed. Why? Because my father's here, because this is my home, because I don't take orders from men who think money solves everything. She met his gaze steadily. And because I didn't see anything worth running from. For a long moment, Pierce just looked at her. Then he tucked the envelope back into his jacket and started the engine. Suit yourself. But Kiara, she waited. You're not invisible anymore, remember that. He drove her back to the rose garden and left without another word. Kiara stood in the gravel drive, watching the Bentley disappear around the bend, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She'd made a choice. She just didn't know yet how much it would cost her. The days that followed felt like walking on a frozen lake, every step a gamble that the ice wouldn't crack beneath her feet. Kiara kept her head down and her hands busy, pruning roses and planting bulbs, and pretending everything was normal. But she felt eyes on her now, Marcus watching from the main house steps. Other security personnel she'd never noticed before suddenly appearing in her periphery. And Pierce. God, Pierce was everywhere. Not physically. He didn't seek her out or speak to her, but she saw his car on the estate more often than before. Caught glimpses of him through windows. Once, she looked up from weeding the herb garden and found him standing on the second-floor balcony, smoking a cigarette and staring directly at her. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. Just took another drag and watched her like she was a puzzle he was working through piece by piece. It should have terrified her. Instead, it made her angry. Who the hell did he think he was, turning her life into surveillance theater? She hadn't asked for this, hadn't asked to witness his violence or become a loose end in whatever war the Gallaghers were fighting. She'd been content in her invisibility, and now this beautiful, dangerous man had ripped that away like tearing paper. 2 weeks after the greenhouse conversation, Kiara was carrying supplies to the potting shed when she heard voices from inside. She froze, one hand on the door handle. Can't keep doing this. Her father's voice, strained and unfamiliar. We don't have a choice, Peter. That was Crispin Gallagher, Pierce's father. Kiara had only spoken to him a handful of times over the years, but his voice was unmistakable. Smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. The O'Connor situation is getting worse. If Walsh finds out, he won't. We've been careful. Careful isn't enough anymore. We need to move the assets, liquidate what we can, and we need to consider what happens if she... Kiara's foot hit a loose board. The conversation stopped dead. When the door swung open, her father's face was pale as milk. Behind him, Crispin Gallagher stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at her with the same calculating expression Pierce had inherited. Kiara. Her father's voice was too bright. What are you doing here? Getting soil amendments. She held up the empty bucket like evidence. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Crispin smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. No interruption at all. Your father and I were just discussing the spring plantings. Weren't we, Peter? Her father nodded too quickly. Right, spring plantings. Kiara looked between them, her stomach twisting. They were lying, both of them. She could see it in the tightness around her father's mouth, the way Crispin's smile was all teeth and no warmth. I'll come back later, she said. She turned to leave, but Crispin's voice stopped her. Kiara, how are you settling in after the incident? The incident, as if murder was just an unfortunate event, like bad weather or a delayed train. Fine, she said without turning around. I'm fine. Good. That's good. A pause. Pierce tells me you're loyal, smart. Those are valuable qualities. She did turn then, and found Crispin watching her with an expression she couldn't read. I just work in the gardens, Mr. Gallagher. Of course you do. He smiled again. But we take care of our people, Kiara. Remember that. We take very good care of those who belong to us. The words felt like a noose tightening. She left before either of them could say anything else, walking fast across the lawn until she reached the safety of the cottage. Inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, trying to slow her racing heart. The O'Connor situation, what the hell did that mean? And why had her father gone white as a ghost when Crispin mentioned moving assets? She wanted to ask him, wanted to demand answers, but fear kept her quiet. Because something was happening here, something bigger than a single body in a garden. And Kiara was terrified that asking questions would pull her deeper into waters she wasn't equipped to swim. That night, she dreamed of drowning. Pierce showed up at the cottage 3 days later. Not in the Bentley this time, but on foot, appearing out of the November mist like something conjured from smoke. Kiara was washing dishes when she saw him through the kitchen window, hands in his pockets, staring at the cottage door like he was deciding whether to knock or kick it down. She dried her hands and opened the door before he could do either. "My father's not here. I know, he's at the main house." Pierce's eyes traced over her, quick and assessing. "Can I come in?" "No." His mouth twitched. "Still not scared of me?" "Terrified. But I'm also not stupid enough to let you into my home." "Fair enough." He leaned against the door frame, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "I need to ask you something." "Ask it from there." Pierce's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "That conversation you overheard, between your father and mine, what did you hear?" So he knew. Of course he knew. Probably had cameras in the potting shed, microphones in the rose bushes. The Gallaghers controlled everything on this estate, including the air people breathed. "Nothing," Kiara said. "I heard nothing." "Liar." "Then why ask?" Pierce pushed off from the doorframe, and for a second Kiara thought he might actually force his way inside, but he just stood there, close enough to touch, looking at her with something that might have been frustration or might have been respect. "Because I'm trying to decide," he said quietly, "whether you're going to be a problem or an asset." "I'm neither. I'm just the gardener's daughter." "No." Pierce stepped closer, and Kiara's back hit the doorframe. "You stopped being just anything the moment you saw me in that garden. Now you're a variable, and I need to know which way you'll fall." His proximity was overwhelming, all heat and barely contained violence. Kiara's pulse thrummed in her throat. She should push him away, should slam the door in his face, should do literally anything other than stand there breathing in his cologne and feeling her traitorous body respond to the danger he represented. "I'm not going to be a problem," she heard herself say. "I don't know anything. I don't want to know anything. I just want to be left alone. Too late for that." Pierce's hand came up, and for a wild second Kiara thought he might touch her face, but he just braced against the doorframe beside her head, caging her in. "You're already part of this, whether you like it or not." "Part of what?" His eyes searched hers. "Something bigger than both of us." Then he pulled back, and the absence of his warmth felt like cold water. He was halfway across the yard before Kiara found her voice again. "Pierce!" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "The O'Connor situation," she called. "What is it?" His shoulders tensed. When he finally looked back at her, his face was unreadable in the dim light. "Ask your father." Then he was gone, swallowed by the mist. Kiara stood in the doorway for a long time after, her heart hammering, her mind racing. She could still feel the ghost of his presence, the heat of him, the way he'd looked at her like she was something worth studying. And underneath the fear and confusion, she felt something else. Something that terrified her more than Pierce Gallagher's violence ever could. Want. She waited until her father came home that night, after midnight, smelling like whiskey and exhaustion. He hung his coat by the door and nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw her sitting at the kitchen table. "Jesus, Kiara, you scared me." "We need to talk." Peter Finley's face went through several expressions at once. Surprise, dread, resignation. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down heavily. "About what?" "About the O'Connors. About whatever you and Crispin Gallagher were discussing in the potting shed. About why Pierce keeps showing up here like I'm some kind of loose end that needs tying up." Her father's face went pale. "Kiara, don't lie to me. Not anymore." She leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "What's happening? What am I part of that I don't know about?" For a long moment, Peter just stared at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. How much do you remember about your childhood? Before we came here. The question caught her off guard. What? Nothing. I was too young. You said my mother died when I was a baby, and we came to work for the Gallaghers when I was 3. Peter looked up, and his eyes were wet. You were 3 years old, and your mother didn't just die, Kiara. She was murdered. The world tilted. Kiara gripped the table edge. What? Your mother and father both. Car accident, the paper said. But it wasn't an accident. It was an assassination. And you... He took a shaking breath. You weren't supposed to survive it. Kiara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The kitchen walls seemed to press inward. What are you talking about? You're my father. You... I'm not. The words came out broken. I'm not your father, Kiara. I'm the man who saved you, who hid you, who's been protecting you ever since that night 19 years ago when the O'Connor family was wiped off the map and you became the only thing standing between peace and war in this goddamn city. The silence that followed was absolute. Kiara stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. You're lying. I'm not. This is insane. This is... Your real name, Peter said, and his voice cracked on the words, is Kiara O'Connor. And the moment anyone finds out you're alive, you become the most valuable and most dangerous person in Dublin. Kiara backed toward the door, shaking her head. This wasn't happening. Couldn't be happening. Peter Finley was her father, the man who'd raised her, fed her, taught her the names of every plant in the estate gardens. He was steady and solid and real. And now he was sitting at the kitchen table telling her that everything was a lie. No, she whispered. No. Kiara, please. But she was already out the door, running into the night, running anywhere that wasn't here. Wasn't this truth? Wasn't the sound of her entire life shattering like glass? She didn't stop until she reached the greenhouse. Her greenhouse. The one place on this estate that had ever felt like it belonged to her. She collapsed onto the wooden workbench where she'd sat the night she witnessed Pierce's violence, and she wept like something inside her had finally broken beyond repair. She didn't hear the door open. Didn't know anyone was there until a jacket settled over her shoulders, warm and smelling like expensive cologne. Pierce Gallagher sat down beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He didn't speak, didn't try to comfort her, just sat there in silence while Kiara cried herself empty. When she finally had no tears left, she turned to look at him. His face was shadowed in the greenhouse's dim light, but his eyes were steady on hers. You knew, she said hoarsely. You've always known. Pierce didn't deny it. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't my secret to tell. He paused. And because I was hoping you'd never need to know. Kiara laughed, and it came out bitter and jagged. Well, congratulations. Your hope was wasted. Kiara, don't. She pulled his jacket tighter around herself. I can't do this right now. I can't process that my entire life is a lie, and you've been part of that lie, and... Her voice broke. Just tell me one thing, the truth. No more protecting me or hiding things or deciding what I can handle. Pierce's jaw worked. Then, ask. Did you know who I was the night you saw me in the garden? Yes. The answer landed like a punch. Then why didn't you? Because you were safer not knowing. Pierce turned to face her fully. As long as you were just Kiara Finley, the gardener's daughter, you were beneath notice. Invisible. But the moment you become Kiara O'Connor... He stopped, started again. There are people in this city who would kill to get to you, to control you, to use what you represent. What do I represent? Pierce looked at her for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and heavy with something that might have been regret. Power, he said. Legitimacy. A bloodline everyone thought was extinct. You represent everything my father has spent 19 years trying to build and everything George Walsh would kill to destroy. Who's George Walsh? The man who murdered your parents. Pierce's face went hard. The man who's been looking for you ever since. Kiara felt the ground drop out from under her. He knows I'm alive? Not yet. But he will. Pierce stood and extended his hand, which is why you need to come with me, now, tonight, before anyone else figures out what Peter told you. Kiara stared at his outstretched hand. Everything in her screamed to refuse, to run the other direction, to reject this man and his world and the impossible truth he was offering. But where would she run? Back to a father who wasn't her father? Back to a life that had never really existed? Back to invisibility that had already been shattered beyond repair? She took Pierce's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain and terrifying in their strength. He pulled her to her feet, and suddenly they were standing too close, his hand still holding hers, his eyes searching her face like he was memorizing something he might lose. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "I know. Once we leave here, there's no going back. I know that too." Pierce's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it seemed impossible from a man she'd watched kill without hesitation. "You should be scared." "I am." Kiara met his eyes. "But I'm also tired of being invisible." Something flickered in Pierce's expression, surprise again, or maybe something darker. His hand tightened on hers. "Then let's make sure the whole goddamn city sees you." He led her out of the greenhouse, across the rain-soaked lawn, toward the black Bentley waiting in the drive. Kiara didn't look back at the cottage, didn't say goodbye to Peter Finley or the gardens or the girl she'd been before tonight. She just got in the car beside Pierce Gallagher and let him drive her into the dark. Behind them, the Gallagher estate disappeared into the mist. And ahead, Dublin waited, sprawling and dangerous and hungry for the girl everyone thought was dead. Kiara O'Connor was coming home, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Bentley's interior was a capsule of forced calm, leather seats, the low hum of the engine, Pierce's cologne thick enough to taste. Kiara pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched Dublin's outskirts blur past. Street lights painted orange streaks across her vision. Her breath fogged the glass. Pierce hadn't spoken since they left the estate. His hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled precision, jaw set like he was driving toward something he couldn't avoid. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked to the rear-view mirror, checking. Always checking. "Where are we going?" Kiara's voice came out hoarse. "Somewhere safe." That's not an answer. "It's the only one you're getting right now." She turned to look at him. The dashboard lights carved shadows under his cheekbones, made him look older, harder. "You don't get to do that anymore. You don't get to decide what I know." Pierce's mouth tightened. "Fair enough. We're going to one of my father's properties, a flat in the city center. Nobody knows about it except family." "Your father knows I'm alive." "He's known since the beginning. He's the one who helped Peter hide you." The words hit like a fist. Kiara's stomach twisted. "Why?" "Because keeping you hidden kept the peace. The O'Connor family, your family. They controlled half of Dublin's docks, the smuggling routes, legitimate businesses mixed with dirty money. When they died, that power vacuum nearly tore the city apart. My father consolidated what he could, built alliances, made deals. But if anyone found out an O'Connor heir survived," Pierce's hands shifted on the wheel, "it would have started a war nobody could win. So he just buried me, turned me into a ghost." "He kept you alive." Pierce's voice went sharp. "Don't mistake that for nothing." Kiara laughed, bitter and raw. "I'm supposed to be grateful for 19 years of lies? You're supposed to be breathing. That's more than your parents got." The silence that followed was vicious. Kiara wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, wanted to demand he turn the car around and let her disappear back into the safety of not knowing. But that safety was ash now, burned up the moment Peter Finley said her real name. They drove through Dublin's heart, past Temple Bar's neon glow, past the River Liffey's dark water, past crowds of drunk students spilling out of pubs. Normal people living normal lives. Kiara pressed her palm against the window like she could touch that normalcy through the glass. Pierce turned down a narrow street lined with Georgian townhouses, all expensive and elegant and locked tight against the night. He pulled into an underground garage beneath one of the buildings, killed the engine. The silence felt profound. "Stay close to me," he said. "I don't have much choice, do I?" Pierce's eyes met hers. "You always have a choice, Kiara. Remember that." They took a private lift to the 4th floor. The flat was exactly what Kiara expected. Minimalist, expensive, cold as a museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, white walls, black furniture, everything sharp-edged and sterile. The the kind of place where nobody actually lived. Pierce locked the door behind them with 3 separate deadbolts. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's me," he said. "We're secure." "No," she doesn't, because there wasn't time. "I don't give a fuck what you think. We're doing this now." He paused, listened. His jaw worked. "Fine. Tomorrow morning. But just you. Nobody else." He hung up. Kiara stood in the middle of the living room, arms wrapped around herself. "Your father?" "Yes?" "He's angry. He's terrified." Pierce tossed his phone onto the counter. "Which makes him dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Pierce looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured generous measures and handed one to Kiara. "Drink. You'll need it." She took the glass but didn't drink. "Tell me." Pierce downed his whiskey in one swallow, poured another. "My father built his empire on the ashes of yours. When the O'Connors died, he didn't just fill the power vacuum. He took everything. Properties, business interests, bank accounts. All of it folded into Gallagher Holdings through legal maneuvers and forged documents and deals made with men who didn't ask questions." He met her eyes. "Everything I have, everything my family has, it's built on what should have been yours." The words settled like stones in Kiara's chest. "You stole my inheritance. My father did. I was 6 years old. But you knew. You've known for years and you never—" "What was I supposed to do?" Pierce's voice went hard. "Tell you the truth and watch you try to reclaim something that would get you killed? The moment you surface as an O'Connor heir, every criminal, politician, and opportunist in Ireland will come for you. Some will want you dead. Some will want to marry you. Some will just want to control what you represent." He stepped closer. "And George Walsh, the man who murdered your parents, he'll want to finish what he started." Kiara finally drank. The whiskey burned going down. "Why did he kill them?" "Wrong place, wrong time. The bomb was meant for my father. Walsh's people got the wrong car." Pierce's expression went dark. "Your family died because of my father's enemies, because of our world. And we've spent 19 years making sure you never had to pay for that mistake. By erasing me, by protecting you. There's a difference." "Is there?" Pierce moved closer, close enough that Kiara could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to watch you for years, knowing what you should have been, knowing what we took from you? You think it didn't eat at me every time I saw you in those gardens, invisible and safe, and completely unaware that you were worth more than everything the Gallaghers owned combined?" His voice had dropped to something raw, something that sounded almost like pain. Kiara set down her glass. Her hands were shaking. "Then why tell me now? Why not just let me keep living the lie?" Pierce's laugh was bitter. "Because George Walsh is getting old, and desperate men make stupid moves. My father's sources say Walsh has been digging into the O'Connor deaths again, asking questions, following leads. It's only a matter of time before he finds something that points to you. And when he does, he'll come for you." Pierce's hand came up, hesitated, then touched her face, just his fingertips against her jaw, gentle enough to shatter. "And I won't let that happen." Kiara should pull away, should put distance between herself and this man who'd lied to her, who'd watched her live half a life while knowing the truth. But his touch was warm and steady, and she was so goddamn tired of being alone. "What do I do?" she whispered. "You let me protect you. You trust me. And you stay alive long enough for us to figure out how to end this without getting you killed." "That's not much of a plan." Pierce's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "It's the only one we've got." Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. Pierce pulled away, checked the screen. His entire body went rigid. "What?" Kiara asked. "It's Marcus," Pierce answered. "Talk to me." "When?" "How bad?" "Jesus Christ, okay. Lockdown protocol. Nobody in or out. I'll handle it." He hung up. When he looked at Kiara, his face was carved from stone. "Your father's been taken." The world tilted. "What?" 20 minutes ago. 3 men. Professional job. They hit the cottage, grabbed Peter, and disappeared. Pierce was already moving, pulling weapons from hidden compartments Kiara hadn't noticed. A gun. A knife. "Walsh knows you're alive." "You don't know that. You can't—" "Who else would take Peter?" Pierce's voice was sharp as broken glass. "This is a message. Walsh is telling us he knows something's changed, and he wants leverage. Kiara's vision swam. Peter Finley, not her father, but the man who'd raised her, who'd hidden her, who'd loved her as if she were his own, was in the hands of a man who murdered families. We have to get him back. We will. When? Pierce looked at her, and something in his expression made her blood run cold. When it's safe. When we have a plan. When... Fuck your plan! Kiara's voice came out steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. That man gave up 19 years of his life to protect me. I'm not leaving him with Walsh while you strategize. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Pierce closed the distance between them in 2 strides, grabbed her shoulders. Not rough, but firm enough to make her focus. George Walsh doesn't want Peter. He wants you. This is bait. We go after Peter, we walk straight into whatever trap Walsh has set, and you die. That's how this ends. So what? We just abandon him? We stay smart. We wait for Walsh to make contact. He'll want to negotiate, and when he does, he's going to hurt Peter. Kiara's voice broke. He's going to torture him for information, and Peter's going to tell him everything because that's what people do when they're being cut apart. Every second we wait, Peter's paying for my existence. Pierce's grip tightened. I know. Then do something. I am. The words exploded out of him. I'm keeping you alive. That's what I'm doing. Because if I lose you to Walsh, everything your parents died for, everything Peter sacrificed, every year I spent watching you from a distance and wanting things I had no right to want, all of it becomes meaningless. The silence rang. Kiara stared at him, at the rawness in his face, at the way his hands trembled slightly against her shoulders. What did you just say? Pierce released her, stepped back, ran a hand through his hair. Nothing. Forget it. You wanted... I said forget it. He turned away, jaw clenched. We're not doing this right now. But Kiara's mind was racing. The way Pierce looked at her in the gardens, the jacket he'd given her in the greenhouse, the way his thumb had brushed her cheek 2 minutes ago like she was something precious. How long? Kiara, how long have you? Since you were 17. The admission came out quiet, defeated. You were pruning the wisteria near the south gate. You'd cut your hand on the shears and you were swearing, really creative swearing, the kind you don't expect from someone who looks like you. And you didn't notice I was there. I watched you bandage yourself up, still cursing, and I thought... He stopped. I thought I'd never seen anything more real in my entire life. Kiara couldn't breathe. You were 23. I know. I was a kid. I know that too. Which is why I never... Pierce turned to face her. I'm not a good man, Kiara. I've done things that would make you sick. But I'm not that. I never touched you, never pursued you. I just watched from a distance and hated myself for wanting something I couldn't have. And now? Now you're 19 and I'm 25 and the world's burning down around us and I still can't have you. His smile was bitter. Because the moment you understand what my family took from you, you're going to hate me more than you hate Walsh, and you'll be right to. Before Kiara could respond, Pierce's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his entire demeanor shifted. It's Walsh. What does it say? Pierce handed her the phone. The message was brief. I have something that belongs to you. You have something that belongs to me. Let's trade. Instructions to follow. Come alone, or he dies screaming. Below the text was a photo. Peter Finley tied to a chair, blood running from his nose. But alive. Still alive. Kiara's hands shook. We have to go. It's a trap. I don't care. Kiara. That man is my father. Her voice cracked. Maybe not by blood, but by every way that matters. He chose me, protected me, loved me when he had no reason to. And I will not let him die alone in some warehouse because you're afraid of Walsh's trap. Pierce stared at her. Something in his expression shifted. You go. You might not come back. Then I don't come back. Just like that? Just like that. Kiara met his eyes. I've been invisible my whole life, Pierce. Maybe it's time I became something worth killing for. For a long moment, Pierce just looked at her. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Okay. Okay? We'll do it your way, but we do it smart. He was already moving, pulling out equipment, weapons, body armor. Walsh wants to trade. Fine, we give him exactly what he wants. What does he want? Pierce looked at her, and his smile was cold as winter. You. The plan was insane. Kiara knew it was insane. But she also knew Pierce wouldn't let her walk into Walsh's hands without backup, and the alternative, leaving Peter to die, wasn't an option she could live with. They spent 2 hours preparing. Pierce made calls, quiet, clipped conversations that painted a picture of the Gallagher organization mobilizing, men being positioned, weapons being distributed, exit routes being mapped. My father's going to lose his mind when he finds out, Pierce said, strapping a holster under his jacket. Will he try to stop us? Probably, which is why we're not telling him until it's done. Pierce handed her a bulletproof vest. Put this on. Kiara stared at the heavy Kevlar. I don't know how to use a gun. You won't need to. You just need to not get shot. He helped her into the vest, his hands efficient and impersonal. But when he pulled the straps tight, his fingers lingered for just a second. Kiara, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does. Pierce's eyes met hers. Run. Don't try to save me. Don't try to save Peter. Just run and don't stop until you're out of Ireland. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Because if Walsh gets his hands on you, everything we've done to protect you becomes worthless. His jaw tightened. Promise me. Kiara wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell him she wouldn't abandon anyone else. But the look in his eyes, desperate and fierce and terrified in a way she'd never seen from him, made her nod. I promise. It was a lie. They both knew it. Walsh's instructions came an hour later. A warehouse near the docks. Midnight. Come alone or Peter dies. Pierce drove them through Dublin's sleeping streets. The Bentley felt like a hearse. Kiara watched the city pass, pubs closing, couples stumbling home drunk, a woman smoking alone outside a convenience store. Normal people living normal lives, while Kiara drove toward something that would probably kill her. Tell me about them, she said suddenly. Pierce glanced at her. Who? My parents. The O'Connors. Tell me who they were. Pierce was quiet for a long moment. Then, your father was Declan O'Connor. Ran the Dublin docks like a kingdom. Smart. Ruthless when he needed to be, but fair. People respected him. Your mother was Claire, French-Irish. She ran the legitimate side, restaurants, import businesses. She was the face people saw while your father handled the shadows. He paused. They loved each other. Really loved each other. That was rare in our world. Did you know them? I met them a few times when I was young. Your father came to our house once for a meeting. You were there. You must have been 2, maybe 3. You were wearing a yellow dress and you kept trying to climb onto the dining table. Your mother kept pulling you down and you'd just climb right back up. Pierce smiled faintly. Stubborn even then. Kiara tried to imagine it, tried to reach back into a past she couldn't remember. But there was nothing, just fog and the faint sense of loss for people she'd never really known. What happened to their bodies? She asked. Buried. St. Michael's Cemetery. The funeral was massive. Half the city showed up. Your name was on the tombstone next to theirs. The world thought the entire family was gone. But I wasn't. But you weren't. Pierce's hands tightened on the wheel. My father's driver pulled you from the wreckage before the police arrived. You were burned, bleeding, barely breathing. He brought you to our estate and my father made a choice. He could turn you over to the authorities, let the world know an O'Connor survived, and watch Dublin tear itself apart. Or he could hide you, erase you, and maybe buy everyone a few years of peace. So he chose the lie. He chose survival. For you. For all of us. Kiara looked out the window. I don't know if that makes him a hero or a coward. Neither do I, Pierce said quietly. They reached the docks. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, a massive concrete structure with broken windows and rust staining its walls. Pierce killed the engine 2 blocks away. Last chance, he said. We can still turn around. Kiara reached for the door handle. Not a chance in hell. Pierce caught her wrist. When she looked at him, his face was raw with something that looked like pain. If I don't make it out, stop. If I don't make it out, he continued, there's a safe deposit box at Allied Irish Bank, downtown branch. Keys in my desk at the estate, bottom drawer, hidden compartment. Everything you need to know about your family, accounts, properties, legal documents, it's all there. Take it. Take everything. And disappear. Kiara's throat tightened. Pierce, he pulled her close, fast and desperate, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't romantic. It was violent and terrified and tasted like goodbye. His hand fisted in her hair, his mouth moving against hers like he was trying to memorize her. Kiara gasped, and he deepened the kiss, and for 5 seconds the world disappeared into heat and want, and the crushing certainty that this was the worst possible time for this to be happening. Pierce pulled back, breathing hard. I shouldn't have done that. No, Kiara's voice shook. You shouldn't have. I'm sorry. Don't be. She touched his face, just once. But if we survive this, we're going to talk about your timing. Pierce's laugh was shaky. Deal. They got out of the car. The dock smelled like salt and oil and rot. Pierce handed Kiara an earpiece. Keep this in. I'll be close. Anything goes wrong, you say the word and I come in. What word? Wisteria. Kiara blinked. The plant? The moment I knew I was fucked. Pierce checked his gun. If you say it, I'll know. They approached the warehouse from opposite sides. Pierce melted into shadows like he was born to them. Kiara walked straight toward the main entrance, every step feeling like the last solid ground before a fall. The warehouse doors stood open. Inside was darkness and the drip of water somewhere in the distance. Kiara stepped through and the doors slammed shut behind her. Lights blazed on, blinding. Kiara threw up a hand to shield her eyes. When her vision cleared, she saw Peter Finley. He was tied to a chair in the center of the empty warehouse floor, exactly like the photo. Blood crusted his face. One eye was swollen shut, but he was alive. He was breathing. Kiara. His voice was wrecked. You shouldn't be here. I know. You need to run. I know that too. Footsteps echoed from the shadows. A man emerged, 60s, gray hair, expensive suit. He moved like someone who'd never had to worry about violence touching him personally, like someone who paid others to do his bleeding. George Walsh smiled at her. Hello, Kiara. We've been looking for you for a very long time. Kiara's hands clenched into fists. Let him go. Of course, right after we have a little chat. Walsh circled her slowly, studying her like she was livestock. You look like your mother. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw. Claire was beautiful. Shame she had to die. You killed her. I killed your father. Your mother's death was collateral. Walsh shrugged. Wrong place, wrong time. The bomb was meant for Crispin Gallagher, but your father decided to borrow his car that night. Unfortunate. The words landed like punches. Kiara forced herself to breathe. You're confessing? Why not? There's nobody here to hear it except us, and dead women don't testify. Walsh stopped in front of her. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign some papers transferring your inheritance, which legally you do still hold, hidden in trusts and offshore accounts, to me. Then I'm going to let Peter go. And then, he smiled. Well, I'll figure out what to do with you. And if I refuse? Walsh pulled out a knife. The blade caught the light. Then I start cutting pieces off Peter until you change your mind. Peter's voice was hoarse. Don't do it, Kiara. Don't give him anything. Shut up. Walsh moved toward Peter with the knife. Wait. Kiara's voice cracked. I'll sign. Just don't hurt him. Walsh paused, smiled. That's a good girl. He produced papers from his jacket. Real legal documents, typed and formal. Transfer of assets. Relinquishment of rights. Everything the O'Connor family had built, signed away with a pen. Kiara took the papers, read them slowly, buying time, waiting for Pierce to make his move. But nothing happened. Walsh's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his smile widened. That's excellent news, yes. Bring him in. Kiara's stomach dropped. What? The side door opened. 2 men dragged someone in, thrown him to the concrete floor. Pierce. Blood ran from his temple. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. He looked up at Kiara, and his expression was pure fury. Found him on the south perimeter, one of Walsh's men said. He wasn't alone. We've got 3 more Gallagher men contained outside. Walsh laughed. Pierce Gallagher. Should have known you couldn't stay away. He looked at Kiara. Did you really think I wouldn't expect backup? I've been planning this for weeks, since the moment I realized you were alive. How? Kiara whispered. Your father made a mistake. He got sentimental. Visited your parents' grave on the anniversary of their death. My people have been watching that cemetery for years. We followed him home. Walsh crouched next to Pierce. The Gallaghers have been hiding you, profiting from you, using what should have been yours to build their empire. Did Pierce tell you that? Did he mention that every dollar his family has is stolen from your inheritance? Pierce's eyes met Kiara's. Don't listen to him. Why not? Walsh stood. I'm the only one telling her the truth. The Gallaghers killed her family. That's a lie. Pierce's voice was raw. Is it? Your father's car. The bomb meant for him. Declan O'Connor died in Crispin Gallagher's place, and Crispin repaid that sacrifice by stealing everything the O'Connors built. Walsh turned to Kiara. Pierce doesn't love you. He loves what you represent. Control. Power. The legitimacy your name gives his family's blood money. That's not true. Pierce struggled against his restraints. Kiara, listen to me. Enough! Walsh pulled out a gun, pressed it against Peter's head. Sign the papers, now. Or I put a bullet in the man who raised you, then one in your boyfriend, and then I take my time with you. Kiara looked at Peter, at Pierce, at the papers in her shaking hands. She thought about her mother in a yellow dress, about Declan O'Connor, who ran the docks like a kingdom, about 19 years lived in gardens and shadows, about Pierce's kiss tasting like desperation. She thought about power, about choice, about the fact that everyone in this room had been making decisions for her since before she could remember, and she made one herself. Okay, Kiara said. She took the pen Walsh offered. I'll sign. Peter's voice broke. Kiara, no. She signed her name at the bottom of each page. Kiara O'Connor. The signature felt foreign, like signing away someone else's life. Walsh took the papers, checked them, smiled. Excellent. I'm almost sorry to kill you. You're much more cooperative than your father was. I have one question first, Kiara said. Walsh holstered his gun. You've earned it. The recording you just confessed to. Kiara pulled a small device from inside her vest, held it up. How long does it take for something like this to upload to the cloud? Walsh's face went white. About 2 minutes, Kiara continued, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. Which means the audio of you confessing to murdering my family, threatening Peter, and extorting me? That's already been heard by about 15 lawyers, 3 police officers, and a very angry criminal lord named Crispin Gallagher. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Men in body armor poured through, not Gallagher's people. Police. Real police with badges and guns and authority Walsh couldn't buy his way out of. Walsh spun toward Kiara, gun coming up. You little... Pierce moved. Even with his hands bound, he threw himself at Walsh's legs, bringing the older man down. The gun fired, loud as thunder in the enclosed space, but the shot went wide. Kiara ran to Peter, fumbling with the ropes. Her hands shook so badly she could barely work the knots. Clever girl, Peter whispered. Your mother would be proud. Around them, chaos erupted, police shouting, Walsh's men being forced to the ground. Someone cut Pierce's zip ties and he was up, blood running down his face, moving toward Kiara with single-minded focus. You set this up, he said when he reached her. Not a question. Delaney helped. Kiara freed the last rope from Peter's wrists. Walsh's lawyer. Turns out he has a conscience after all. You recorded him confessing to murder, an extortion, an attempted murder, and Pierce grabbed her face and kissed her again, hard and relieved and still tasting like blood. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with something that might have been awe. You're fucking magnificent. I'm fucking terrified. That too. Police were hauling Walsh to his feet, reading him his rights. The older man was screaming about lawyers, about connections, about how this wouldn't stick. But Kiara saw the fear in his eyes, the realization that his empire was collapsing in real time. Kiara O'Connor? A detective approached, badge held up. We're going to need your statement. She nodded. Can I have 5 minutes first? The detective looked at Peter's bloody face, at Pierce's protective stance, at Kiara's shaking hands. 5 minutes. Then we do this by the book. They stepped outside. The Dublin night air was cold and clean. Kiara breathed it in, tasting salt from the nearby harbor. That was insane, Pierce said. That was the most insane thing I've ever witnessed. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. You signed away your inheritance. Papers can be contested, especially when they're signed under duress. Kiara leaned against the warehouse wall. Besides, I got something better. What? She pulled out her phone, showed him the uploaded recording. Insurance, Walsh's confession, everything he did, everything he is, recorded and distributed. Even if the police somehow don't make the charges stick, the whole world knows what he did now. Pierce stared at the phone, then at her. When did you plan this? When you were making your calls, I called Delaney, told him I needed help. He said Walsh had been pressuring him for years, forcing him to do illegal work, threatening his family. He wanted out. I gave him away. Kiara pocketed the phone. I might have been invisible my whole life, Pierce, but I learned how to watch, how to listen, how to see the cracks in things. You outplayed him. I outplayed everyone. She met his eyes. Including you. Something flickered across Pierce's face. Respect, fear, want. What happens now? Now? Kiara looked back toward the warehouse where police were processing the scene. Now I give my statement. Now Walsh goes to prison. Now I figure out who Kiara O'Connor actually is instead of who everyone else decided she should be. And us? Kiara looked at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who'd lied to her and protected her and kissed her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. I don't know yet. Ask me when I'm done being angry about the 19 years you stole from me. Pierce's smile was sad. That's fair. But Pierce... She reached out, touched his face where blood was drying. Thank you for keeping me alive. Even if you did it wrong. I'd do it wrong again, he said quietly. If it meant you were still breathing. Kiara didn't have an answer for that, so she just walked back into the warehouse to give her statement and watched as George Walsh, the man who murdered her family, who'd hunted her for 19 years, was finally led away in handcuffs. Behind her, Pierce stood in the shadows. And somewhere in Dublin, Crispin Gallagher was making phone calls, and Crispin Gallagher's office smelled like old money and older secrets, cigar smoke, leather, and something darker underneath that Kiara couldn't name. She sat across from him at a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's houses, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. 3 days had passed since Walsh's arrest. 3 days of police statements, lawyer meetings, and a media circus that had turned her face into front-page news across Ireland. The lost O'Connor heir. The girl who brought down Walsh. Dublin's ghost made flesh. She hated every headline. Crispin studied her over steepled fingers. He was 60 but looked younger, sharp-featured and silver-haired, with Pierce's eyes and none of his warmth. You've made quite a mess, Miss O'Connor. I ended a murderer's career. You exposed 19 years of careful work. You painted a target on your back visible from space. And you did it without consulting anyone who might have helped you do it smarter. His voice was level, cold. Do you have any idea how many people now know you exist? How many want what you represent? Kiara lifted her chin. I know exactly what I did. Do you? Crispin leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a 19-year-old girl who got lucky and thinks that makes her dangerous. I am dangerous. No, you're exposed. There's a difference. Crispin pulled a folder from his desk, slid it across to her. These are the threats that have come in since your face hit the news. Death threats, kidnapping threats, marriage proposals from men who want access to the O'Connor fortune. Legitimate business inquiries mixed with criminal propositions, all in 72 hours. Kiara opened the folder. Her stomach turned. Page after page of messages, emails, photos. Some were crude, some were terrifyingly specific. One showed a surveillance photo of her leaving the police station, crosshairs drawn over her face in red marker. This is what visibility costs, Crispin said. This is what happens when you step out of the shadows without protection. I have protection. Kiara closed the folder. I have lawyers. I have Peter. I have... Pierce? Crispin's mouth twisted. My son is many things, Miss O'Connor, but he's not equipped to handle what's coming. He's too close to you, too compromised. The moment someone threatens you, he'll burn the city down without thinking about consequences. Maybe that's what we need. No. What you need is control, structure, a plan that doesn't involve recording murderers and hoping the police actually do their jobs. Crispin stood, walked to the window overlooking the estate grounds. I'm offering you something better. Kiara tensed. What? Protection? Real protection. I'll fold the O'Connor assets back under Gallagher management, temporarily, until you're ready to handle them yourself. I'll provide security, legal counsel, a buffer between you and everyone who wants a piece of you. He turned to face her. In exchange, you stay out of sight. You let me handle the business, and you trust that I have your best interests at heart. Like you did for the last 19 years? Crispin's expression didn't change. I kept you alive. You erased me. I protected you from this. He gestured at the folder of threats, from becoming a commodity, a target, a symbol people could manipulate. His voice softened slightly. Your parents were my friends, Kiara. I couldn't save them. But I could save you. Everything I did, hiding you, controlling your inheritance, keeping you invisible, it was to give you a chance at a normal life. A life built on lies. A life. Crispin's jaw tightened. Do you know what happened to the other criminal family's children when their parents died? They became puppets, bargaining chips. Trophies married off to forge alliances, where they ended up dead before they hit 21. You got 19 years apiece. That's more than most. Kiara stood. I don't want your protection. Then you're a fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool who owns half of Dublin's waterfront and more money than I can count. That buys me options. Money doesn't buy survival. Crispin moved closer. You think you've won because Walsh is in handcuffs? Walsh was old, desperate, sloppy. There are a dozen men just like him, younger, smarter, more patient, who are watching you right now and planning their moves. And when they come for you, recording devices won't save you. Then I'll find another way. There is no other way. Crispin's voice went hard. You're an O'Connor. That name comes with enemies built into the foundation. Your only choice is whether you face them with help or die alone pretending you're strong enough to survive this world. Kiara met his eyes. I'm not making any deals until I know the truth. All of it. You know the truth. No. I know what you've told me, what Pierce told me, what Walsh screamed before they dragged him away. But nobody's explained why my family was really in that car, why they borrowed yours, why the bomb was even there in the first place. She stepped closer. You said my parents were your friends, so tell me what really happened the night they died. Crispin's face went carefully blank. That's not a conversation for today. Then when? When you're ready to hear it. I'm ready now. No. Crispin walked back to his desk, picked up his phone. You're angry, grieving, looking for someone to blame who isn't currently in prison. That's understandable. But it doesn't make you ready for the whole truth. Kiara's hands clenched. You're afraid. Excuse me? You're afraid of what I'll do when I know everything. Afraid I'll realize the Gallaghers aren't heroes who saved me. You're vultures who profited from my family's corpses. Her voice shook with fury. So tell me, Mr. Gallagher, how much of the O'Connor fortune is left? How much did you steal while pretending to protect me? The silence stretched taut as wire. Then Crispin smiled. It was a terrible thing, cold and sharp and utterly without humor. Everything. I took everything. Kiara's breath stopped. The docks, the shipping routes, the warehouses, the front businesses, the offshore accounts. Every asset your father built, I absorbed into Gallagher Holdings the year after your family died. Legally, cleanly, through shell companies and proxy buyers and lawyers who didn't ask questions. Crispin's voice was matter-of-fact. The money I've been setting aside for you, that's new wealth. Investments I made using O'Connor capital as seed money. But the original fortune? That's been Gallagher property for 18 years. The room tilted. Kiara grabbed the desk edge to steady herself. You stole my inheritance. I took what would have been seized by the state or carved up by your family's enemies. I made it productive, grew it, used it to build something stable. Crispin leaned back in his chair. You want to be angry? Fine, be angry. But understand that without what I did, you'd have nothing to claim. The O'Connor empire would be dust. At least this way there's something left to fight over. You had no right. I had every right. The words cracked like a whip. Your father was my partner, my friend. We built half this city's infrastructure together, the clean businesses, the ones that employed thousands of people. When he died, those companies needed leadership or they'd collapse. I provided it. I kept people employed. I maintained what Declan built. Crispin's expression hardened. And I kept you hidden while doing it. That was the deal I made with Peter Finley. He'd raise you as his own, keep you invisible, and I'd preserve the O'Connor legacy until you were old enough to claim it. But you never intended to let me claim it. I intended to let you choose when you turned 25, when you'd had time to build a life separate from your family name. I was going to give you the truth and let you decide whether you wanted this world or the safety of anonymity. His voice went quiet. But you forced my hand. You went after Walsh. You made yourself visible. And now everyone knows the O'Connor heir is alive and vulnerable and doesn't have a fucking clue how to protect herself. Kiara's vision blurred. With rage. With grief. With the crushing weight of realizing that everything, every relationship, every moment of safety had been built on theft. Does Pierce know? Of course he knows. For how long? Crispin hesitated. Since he was 18, old enough to understand the business, old enough to help manage some of the O'Connor assets. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Pierce had known for 7 years, 7 years of watching her in those gardens, knowing what she should have owned, knowing his family had stolen it from her. And he'd said nothing. Miss O'Connor! But Kiara was already moving toward the door. She needed air, needed space, needed to be anywhere but in this office with this man who'd calmly confessed to destroying her birthright. Running won't change anything, Crispin called after her. Kiara stopped at the door, looked back. No. But staying here while you pretend you did me a favor might make me do something we'll both regret. She walked out before he could respond. Pierce found her at the greenhouse 2 hours later. The same greenhouse where she'd cried the night Peter told her the truth. The same bench where Pierce had sat beside her and offered comfort while hiding the worst lie of all. He stood in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun. You talked to my father. Kiara didn't turn around. He told me everything. Kiara, how long have you known? Her voice was steady, dead. 7 years? 8? Pierce stepped inside, closed the door. Since I was 18, my father brought me into the business, showed me the books, the O'Connor holdings that had been absorbed into ours. He said it was necessary, that it kept the peace. And you believed him? I was 18. I believed everything he told me. Pierce moved closer. But later, when I was old enough to understand what it really meant, I tried to push back, tried to argue that we should separate the O'Connor assets, hold them in trust, prepare for the day when you'd claim them. What did he say? That it was too complicated, too risky, that untangling everything would expose vulnerabilities our enemies could exploit. Pierce's voice went rough. And he was right. The moment we started separating assets, someone would notice, would ask questions, would start connecting you to the O'Connor name. Kiara finally turned to face him. So you just accepted it, lived off my family's money, drove their cars, wore their wealth like it was yours. Yes. Pierce didn't flinch. I did, and I hated myself for it, but I also couldn't see a way to give it back without getting you killed. That's convenient. It's true. Pierce closed the distance between them. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to watch you every day knowing what my family took from you? It ate at me, Kiara. Every time I saw you in those gardens, living small, living invisible, I knew you should have been living like royalty. And I couldn't do a goddamn thing about it without risking your life. You could have told me. When? When you were 17 and didn't know who you really were? When you were 18 and still believed Peter Finley was your father? When you were 19 and finally learning the truth while Walsh was circling? Pierce's hands clenched. There was never a good time. And by the time I realized I was in love with you, telling you the truth meant destroying any chance you'd ever feel the same way. The confession hung in the air between them. Kiara stared at him,
at this beautiful, lying man who'd kissed her like she was oxygen. You don't get to do that. You don't get to hide behind love like it justifies theft.
I'm not justifying anything. I'm explaining. Pierce's voice cracked. What my family did was wrong. What I did, continuing it, profiting from it, lying to you about it, that was wrong too. I know that. But Kiara, if I could go back, if I could give you everything that should have been yours from the beginning, I would. In a heartbeat. But you can't.
No, I can't. The best I can do is help you take it back now. Pierce reached for her hand. Kiara pulled away. The O'Connor assets are still traceable, still separable from Gallagher Holdings. It'll take time and lawyers, and it'll expose vulnerabilities my father's terrified of. But it's possible, and I'll help you do it. I'll testify against my own family if that's what it takes. Kiara's laugh was bitter. You think that fixes this? No, but it's a start.
It's nothing. Kiara stood. You want to help me, Pierce? Then stay away from me. Stop pretending you care. Stop acting like we're on the same side when your family has spent 19 years destroying mine. Pierce's face went pale. You don't mean that.
Yes, I do. Kiara moved toward the door. I don't trust you. I don't trust your father. And I sure as hell don't trust that anything you've told me is the whole truth. For all I know, Walsh wasn't even wrong about the bombing. Maybe your father did kill my parents. Maybe the wrong car was just a convenient story. That's not true.
How would you know?
Kiara spun to face him. You were 6 years old. You believed everything your father told you. But what if he lied? What if the Gallaghers wanted the O'Connors dead so they could take everything? What if you've been defending a murderer your whole life? The words hit like bullets. Pierce's expression shattered. You really believe that? I don't know what to believe anymore. Kiara's voice broke. Everyone I've trusted has lied to me. Peter, your father, you. The only person who told me the truth was Walsh, and he was trying to kill me when he did it, so forgive me if I don't have faith in anything anyone says. She left the greenhouse before Pierce could respond. Left him standing there among the jasmine and shadows, looking like she'd gutted him. Good, Kiara thought viciously. Let him feel what I feel.
But the vindication was hollow. Because under the rage and betrayal, she could still feel the ghost of his kiss. Could still remember the way he'd thrown himself at Walsh's legs to protect her. Could still hear him saying, I'm in love with you, like the words cost him everything. She hated that it mattered. Kiara moved into a Dublin flat the next day. A small place in Rathmines that Delaney, Walsh's former lawyer, now her legal counsel, had arranged. 2 bedrooms, basic furniture, windows that overlooked a street full of students and young professionals going about their normal lives. Peter helped her move in. He was still healing from Walsh's interrogation, bruises fading from purple to yellow, a limp he tried to hide. They worked in silence, unpacking boxes of clothes and books, and the few possessions that felt like hers. You don't have to do this alone, Peter said finally, setting down a box of kitchen supplies. You could have stayed at the estate, could have accepted Crispin's protection, and let him control me like he controlled my inheritance? No thanks. Kiara pulled dishes from a box. I'm done being managed by men who think they know better than me. Peter was quiet for a moment. I know you're angry with me too. I'm furious with you. I understand. Do you? Kiara set down a plate harder than necessary. You're not my father, Peter. You never were. You're just another man who lied to me for 19 years. The words landed like blows. Peter's face went gray. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Kiara turned on him. I spent my entire life thinking I was your daughter, thinking I knew where I came from, and it was all bullshit. Every bedtime story, every birthday, every time you called me your little girl, it was a performance, a role you played because Crispin Gallagher paid you to. That's not true. Peter's voice shook. I loved you. From the moment I pulled you from that car wreckage, broken and bleeding and too small to survive what you'd been through, I loved you. Not because Crispin asked me to, not because of duty, because you were mine in every way that mattered. Except blood. Blood doesn't make a family. Peter stepped closer. I changed your diapers. I taught you to read. I stayed up with you when you had nightmares. I watched you grow from a terrified 3-year-old who couldn't speak for 6 months after the accident into the strongest person I've ever known. His voice cracked.
I'm not your biological father, but I am your dad, and nothing you say will change that.
Kiara's vision blurred. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the rage like armor. But looking at Peter's face, bruised and exhausted and full of love, she felt something in her chest crack open.
I don't know how to forgive you, she whispered.
You don't have to, not yet, not until you're ready. Peter pulled her into a careful hug. But I'm not going anywhere, kiddo. Whether you forgive me or not, I'm here. Kiara buried her face against his shoulder and let herself cry. For her parents, for the childhood she'd lost, for 19 years of lies and the impossible task of rebuilding an identity from rubble. When she finally pulled back, Peter's shirt was soaked with her tears. He smiled sadly. Feel better? Not really. That's fair. He squeezed her shoulder. But you will. Eventually. You're an O'Connor. That means you're tougher than anything this city can throw at you.
Kiara wanted to believe him, but she felt fragile as glass.
The media attention was relentless. Journalists camped outside her building. Camera crews followed her to the corner shop. Her face was on every tabloid, every news site. The lost heiress. The girl who survived. Photos of her parents, young and beautiful and dead, appeared next to photos of her, drawing comparisons, speculating about what she'd inherited beyond money. Kiara stopped leaving the flat unless absolutely necessary. Sadi arrived on day 3 with 2 bottles of wine and a fierce expression. All right, this is an intervention. I don't need an intervention. You've been living on tea and rage for 72 hours. That's literally the definition of needing intervention. Sadi pushed her way inside, kicked off her shoes. Where are your glasses? They drank on the floor of the empty living room, backs against the wall, watching the sunset paint Dublin's rooftops gold. Sadi didn't ask probing questions, didn't offer unwanted advice. She just sat there being steady while Kiara fell apart in slow motion. I don't know who I am anymore, Kiara said finally, halfway through the second bottle. You're Kiara, same person you were a month ago. But I'm not. A month ago I was nobody. The gardener's daughter, invisible. Now I'm this, she gestured vaguely at the world beyond the windows. This symbol, this weapon people want to use against each other. The O'Connor heir, the girl who brought down Walsh, the tragic orphan with a fortune. You're also the girl who makes terrible tea and hoards plant facts like their currency. Sadi bumped her shoulder. That hasn't changed. Everything's changed. The circumstances changed. You're still you. Sadi poured more wine. Although I will say, the you who recorded a crime lord confessing to murder was pretty fucking badass. That was some action movie shit. Kiara laughed despite herself. I was terrified the entire time. That's what makes it badass. Bravery isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing it anyway. Sadi studied her. What are you going to do now? I don't know. Take back my inheritance, I guess. Figure out what the O'Connor assets even are. Hire lawyers. Navigate a world I don't understand and hope I don't get killed in the process. Kiara's voice went flat. Maybe fail spectacularly and end up exactly where Walsh wanted me, dead in a ditch somewhere. Or maybe, Sadi said carefully, you succeed. Maybe you take back everything that should have been yours. Maybe you become the person your parents wanted you to be. I don't know who that is. Then figure it out. You've got time, money, freedom, and a best friend who will absolutely help you spend said money on ridiculous things while you figure your shit out. Sadi raised her glass. To Kiara O'Connor, may she be half as terrifying as everyone thinks she is. Kiara clinked glasses. I'll drink to that. But later, after Sadi left, Kiara stood at the window and looked out at Dublin's glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, Pierce was probably drowning his guilt in whiskey. Crispin was probably making plans to mitigate the damage she'd caused. Walsh was sitting in a cell plotting revenge. And dozens of people she'd never met were sharpening knives with her name on them. She was 19 years old, alone, hunted, with an inheritance she didn't understand and enemies she couldn't count. And for the first time in her life, nobody was making decisions for her. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like drowning. The knock came at 2 a.m. Kiara woke to pounding on her door, urgent and aggressive. She grabbed the baseball bat Peter had insisted she keep by the bed and crept to the peephole. Marcus stood in the hallway, Crispin's head of security, the man who'd questioned her the night of the murder. Kiara's hand tightened on the bat. What do you want? To talk. Let me in. It's 2 a.m. I know. Let me in anyway. Marcus's voice was tense. Please, it's about Pierce. The word made her stomach drop. She unlocked the door. Marcus stepped inside and Kiara saw the blood on his shirt. Not his. Too much. Too fresh. He was carrying it from somewhere else. What happened? Kiara demanded. Pierce went after one of Walsh's lieutenants, Liam Burke, the man who actually planted the bomb that killed your parents. Marcus's face was grim. He found Burke in a pub in Talat, beat the shit out of him, would have killed him if we hadn't pulled him off. Kiara's blood ran cold. Is Burke dead? No. Hospitalized, but alive. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. But that's not the problem. Burke started talking before the ambulance came, started screaming about how Pierce killed the wrong person 19 years ago, how Pierce should have been in that car, not Declan O'Connor. The words didn't make sense. What? The bomb. Marcus's voice was careful, precise. It wasn't meant for Crispin. It was meant for Pierce. The world tilted sideways. Pierce was supposed to be in that car, Marcus continued. Crispin had loaned it to your father for the night. But at the last minute, Pierce wanted to go out, to some party. Your father offered to take him. They were going to drop Pierce at the party, then your father and mother were going to dinner. He paused. But Pierce got sick. Food poisoning, we thought. He stayed home, and your parents left without him. Kiara couldn't breathe. So the bomb was meant for Pierce. Walsh wanted Crispin's heir dead, wanted to break the Gallagher succession, but he got your family instead. Marcus's expression was carved from stone, and Pierce has known since he was 21 years old that your parents died in his place. The revelation landed like a bomb itself. Pierce had lied about everything, not just the inheritance, not just the theft. He'd lied about the most fundamental truth of all, that her parents' death was meant for him, that he was the reason her family was murdered, that every moment of her suffering traced back to the fact that he'd lived and they'd died. Where is he? Kiara's voice came from somewhere far away. At the estate, locked in his room. He won't talk to anyone, won't eat, just sits there staring at Burke's blood on his hands. Marcus stepped closer. He's falling apart, Kiara, and I don't know how to stop it. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only person he listens to. The only person who can pull him back from whatever edge he's standing on. Marcus's eyes were desperate. I know what the Gallaghers did to you. I know you have every right to hate us, but Pierce, he's not his father. He's just a man who's been carrying guilt that should have killed him years ago. And right now he needs help before he does something none of us can fix. Kiara stared at him, at the blood on his shirt, at the impossible choice he was asking her to make. Go to Pierce. Comfort the man who'd lied to her about everything. Help the person whose existence had cost her family their lives. Or let him drown. I need to think, she said finally. There's no time. Get out! The words came out sharp, final. Tell Pierce I'm done being manipulated by Gallaghers. Tell him I'm done being responsible for his guilt. Tell him whatever you want. But I'm not coming. Marcus's face fell. Kiara, I said get out. He left without another word. Kiara locked the door behind him and slid down to sit with her back against it. She could feel her heart hammering, could feel the walls closing in, could feel the weight of impossible knowledge pressing against her chest until she couldn't breathe. Her parents had died because Pierce Gallagher got sick, because of chance, because of food poisoning, because of nothing, and he'd known, for years. He'd looked at her in those gardens and known that he was alive because her family was dead. Kiara pressed her hands over her face and screamed, raw and broken and full of rage that had nowhere to go. When she finally stopped, her throat was bleeding and her hands were shaking, and she knew with absolute certainty that she couldn't stay in Dublin anymore. Not with Pierce spiraling, not with Crispin watching, not with the weight of her parents' murder crushing the air from her lungs. She needed to leave, needed to disappear, needed to become invisible again before the city and its ghosts tore her apart from the inside out. Kiara stood, grabbed her phone, and made a call. Delaney? It's me. I need you to do something, and I need you to not ask questions. An hour later, she was in a car headed for the airport. By dawn, Kiara O'Connor had vanished from Dublin entirely. And behind her, Pierce Gallagher sat in his room covered in another man's blood, staring at his hands and wondering if this was what it felt like when the world finally stopped forgiving you for being alive. London was cold and gray and utterly indifferent to Kiara's existence. She rented a studio flat in Brixton under a false name, Emma Collins, the documents Delaney had arranged said. No history, no family, no fortune, just another faceless person in a city of 9 million. For 3 weeks, she lived like a ghost, worked shifts at a coffee shop, kept her head down, spoke to no one beyond what was necessary. At night, she lay awake in the dark and tried not to think about Dublin, about Pierce, about the fact that her parents had died because a 21-year-old got food poisoning, but the anger wouldn't let her rest. It sat in her chest like burning coal, feeding on itself, growing hotter with every hour that passed. She was making coffee during the afternoon rush when she saw him. Pierce Gallagher standing on the other side of the street, hands in his pockets, staring directly at the shop window. He looked like hell, thinner, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes he'd probably slept in. He didn't move, just stood there watching her through the glass like she might disappear if he blinked. Kiara's hands shook. Hot coffee spilled across the counter.
Shit. Sorry.
She grabbed towels, cleaned the mess, tried to focus on the customer in front of her. But when she looked up again, Pierce was crossing the street. He walked into the shop. The bell above the door chimed, cheerful and obscene. Every instinct screamed at Kiara to run, to disappear into the back room and let him stand there until he gave up and left. But she didn't run. She just stood behind the counter, hands braced against the stainless steel, and waited. Pierce stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he looked worse than she'd thought. His jaw was shadowed with days of stubble. His eyes were bloodshot. There was a cut on his knuckles that looked infected. "How did you find me?" Her voice came out steady despite her hammering heart. "Delaney," Pierce's voice was hoarse. "I threatened to burn his office down if he didn't tell me where you went. Then I bribed him when that didn't work. Then I begged." He smiled without humor. "Begging worked. You shouldn't be here." "I know. I left because I didn't want to see you." "I know that too." Pierce's hands flexed at his sides. "But I needed to tell you something, and I couldn't do it over the phone." Kiara glanced at her coworker, a university student named Molly, who was watching this exchange with undisguised curiosity. "I'm taking my break." "But you just took 10 minutes. Kiara untied her apron, threw it on the counter. "Come on." She led Pierce to a park 2 blocks away. They sat on a bench that had graffiti carved into the backrest. Kiara stared at her hands while Pierce sat rigid beside her, the space between them feeling like miles. "I didn't kill your parents," he said finally. "I know. But I'm the reason they're dead." "I know that too." Kiara's voice was flat. "Dead. Walsh wanted you dead. The bomb was for you. They died in your place. Marcus already told me." Pierce flinched. "Then you know I've been living on borrowed time for 19 years. Every breath I've taken since that night. It's been stolen from them. From you. Is that what you came here to say? That you feel guilty?" Kiara turned to look at him. "Because I don't care, Pierce. I don't care about your guilt or your pain or the fact that you've been torturing yourself. My parents are still dead. I still lost 19 years. And you feeling bad about it doesn't change anything." "I know." "Then why are you here?" Pierce's jaw worked. "Because I found something. About your family. About the night they died. Something that changes everything." Kiara's stomach tightened. "What?" "Your parents knew." The words came out broken. "They knew about the bomb. My father warned them, told them not to take the car, but they went anyway." The world stopped. "That's not possible," Kiara whispered. "I found the recordings. My father keeps audio logs of important conversations. Paranoid habit. He's been doing it for decades. I broke into his office, went through everything, and I found the call from the night your parents died." Pierce pulled out his phone, hands shaking. "Do you want to hear it?" Kiara couldn't speak, couldn't move. She just nodded. Pierce pressed play. Static. Then Crispin Gallagher's voice, tense and urgent. "Declan, you can't take that car. We have intel Walsh is planning something tonight. It's not safe." A pause. Then a man's voice, deeper, warmer, with an accent that made Kiara's chest ache, even though she didn't remember it. Her father. Crispin, I appreciate the warning, but if Walsh thinks Pierce is vulnerable, he'll keep trying. Someone needs to draw him out. Not like this. Not with Claire in the car. Not with, my daughter is safe. You promised me that. Peter has her. If something happens to us, she'll be protected. You gave me your word. Another voice. Feminine. Firm. Her mother. We're doing this, Crispin. Walsh needs to think he's won. Needs to believe he's taken out your heir. It's the only way to end this without everyone we love dying in the crossfire. Crispin's voice again, strained. You don't have to do this. Yes, we do. Because if we don't, Walsh will never stop hunting. He'll come for Pierce, then for Kiara, then for every child in every family until Dublin streets run with blood. Declan O'Connor's voice went soft. We can end this, Crispin. We can give them a chance to grow up in a city that isn't burning, but only if we're willing to pay the price. Silence. Then, I'll make sure she knows. When she's old enough. I'll make sure Kiara knows what you did. No. Claire's voice was sharp. You keep her hidden. You let her believe we died in an accident. You give her a normal life. That's all we want. That's all we're asking. The recording ended. Kiara sat frozen. Her vision swam. Her lungs wouldn't work properly. She could hear her own pulse like thunder in her ears. They sacrificed themselves, Pierce said quietly. They knew about the bomb, and they took the car anyway. They died to make Walsh think he'd won. To protect you. To protect me. To end a war before it started. No. The word came out strangled. That's not... They wouldn't... They loved you more than they loved themselves, Pierce's voice cracked. They chose to die so you could live. Kiara stood abruptly. Walked 3 steps. 5. 10. She could feel something breaking inside her chest, something fundamental that she didn't know how to fix. Her parents hadn't been murdered because of chance, because of bad luck, because Pierce got sick. They'd walked into death deliberately, with open eyes, knowing exactly what they were doing to save her. Kiara. Pierce was beside her suddenly, hands hovering like he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. Don't. Her voice was hoarse. Don't touch me. Don't. I can't. But then she was falling, and Pierce caught her, pulled her against his chest while she shattered. She could feel him shaking too, could feel his tears soaking into her hair. They collapsed together onto the cold grass, holding each other like drowning people, and the London traffic roared past without caring. When Kiara finally had breath again, she pulled back enough to see Pierce's face. Your father knew. He's known this whole time. Yes, and he never told me. He promised your parents he wouldn't, that he'd let you live a normal life. Pierce's hands cupped her face. But I'm telling you now, because you deserve to know what they did, what they chose, and because, his voice broke, because I can't carry this alone anymore. Kiara stared at him, at this man who'd lied to her about everything, who'd stolen her inheritance, who'd survived because her parents died. And she realized with cold clarity that she didn't hate him. She hated that she couldn't hate him. Take me back to Dublin, she said. Pierce blinked. What? Take me back. I need to talk to your father. I need... She stopped, started again. I need to finish this, all of it. Walsh, the inheritance, the truth about what the Gallaghers owe me. Everything. Kiara, if you go back now, I know the risks. I don't care. She stood, pulled him up with her. My parents died to end a war, but they didn't end it. They just delayed it. Walsh is in prison, but his organization is still out there. His allies, his people, they're waiting for the right moment to come after me. After you. After everyone connected to that night. Her voice hardened. So I'm going to finish what my parents started. I'm going to take back everything the O'Connors built, and I'm going to burn down anyone who tries to stop me. Pierce stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're serious. Dead serious. You could get killed. Then I get killed. Kiara met his eyes. But I'm done running. I'm done hiding. And I'm done letting other people decide what my life is worth. A slow smile spread across Pierce's face, fierce and almost proud. All right then, let's go to war. They flew back to Dublin that night. First-class seats Pierce paid for with a credit card that probably had more money on it than Kiara had earned in her entire life. She sat by the window and watched London disappear beneath clouds, feeling something shift inside her chest. Fear. Anticipation. The cold certainty that she was walking towards something she might not survive. Pierce sat beside her, silent and tense. His hand rested on the armrest between them, close enough to touch, but not touching. Kiara looked at his scarred knuckles, the infection spreading from that cut, and made a decision. She took his hand. Pierce's fingers closed around hers immediately, tight, desperate, like he'd been waiting for permission. They didn't speak, just sat there holding hands while the plane carried them toward whatever ending waited in Dublin's dark streets. Crispin was waiting at the estate when they arrived. He stood on the front steps, hands in his pockets, watching them get out of the car with an expression Kiara couldn't read. "You came back," he said. "I came back to finish this." Kiara climbed the steps. "And you're going to help me." "Am I?" "Yes. Because if you don't, I'm going to the press with that recording. I'm going to tell the world that Crispin Gallagher let his best friends die to protect his son. That you've been sitting on the truth for 19 years while building an empire on their sacrifice." She stepped closer. "How do you think your business partners will react to that? Your political allies, the families who trust you?" Crispin's expression went cold. "That's blackmail. That's survival." Kiara smiled without humor. "Your son taught me well." For a long moment, Crispin just stared at her. Then he laughed. A real laugh, rich and genuine. "You really are Declan's daughter. He'd be proud." "Don't." Kiara's voice went sharp. "Don't pretend you know what my father would feel. You don't have that right." The laughter died. Crispin nodded once. "Fair enough. What do you want?" "Everything. Full accounting of the O'Connor assets, separation from Gallagher Holdings, legal transfer of control back to me, and access to whatever intelligence network you've been using to track Walsh's people." She paused. "I want names, locations, weaknesses, everything you know about every person who helped Walsh that night. You're planning retaliation. I'm planning justice. There's no difference in our world." Crispin studied her. "You do this? There's no going back. You stop being the victim and become the threat. Every family in Dublin will watch you, judge you, test you, and if you show weakness even once, they'll tear you apart." "Then I won't show weakness." "Kiara," Pierce started. "No." She turned to him. "You don't get to protect me anymore. You don't get to decide what I can handle. This is my choice, my war, and you can either help me fight it or stay out of my way." Pierce's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right, then we fight." Crispin sighed. "You're both insane." "Probably," Kiara smiled. "But we're insane with money and leverage and nothing left to lose. That makes us dangerous. That makes you targets." "We've been targets since the day we were born." Kiara held out her hand. "So, do we have a deal or not?" Crispin looked at her hand, at Pierce standing beside her with blood on his knuckles and loyalty in his eyes, at the girl who'd walked into his office 3 weeks ago looking lost and was now standing on his doorstep demanding war. He took her hand. "Deal, but on one condition." "What?" "You let me teach you how to survive this world before you try to burn it down. You want to reclaim the O'Connor empire? Fine, but you do it smart, strategic. You learn the players, the rules, the ways to kill people without ever touching them." His grip tightened. "Your parents died to give you a future. Don't waste it by getting yourself killed in the first month." Kiara wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she didn't need his guidance, but she also wasn't stupid. She knew nothing about this world beyond what she'd seen from the gardens, and rushing in blind would get her killed. "How long?" she asked. 3 months. Learn the business, meet the families, build alliances, make yourself indispensable before you make yourself threatening." Crispin released her hand. "Then when you're ready, we'll help you take back everything that should have been yours. And Pierce stays by your side if that's what you want. He's good at violence. You'll need that." Crispin's eyes moved to his son. "But Pierce, if you get her killed because you can't control yourself—" "I won't." Pierce's voice was iron. "I'll die before I let anything happen to her." "That's what I'm afraid of." Crispin turned back toward the house. "Come inside. We have work to do." The next 3 months were brutal. Kiara learned the language of money, Offshore accounts, shell companies, asset transfers that looked legitimate on paper, but were really just theft and expensive suits. She met with lawyers, accountants, politicians who smiled at her like vipers deciding whether she was prey or predator. She learned the names of Dublin's families: the Ryans, who controlled the north side; the Brennans, who owned half the construction contracts in the city; the Quinns, who ran gambling operations from Cork to Belfast. Every family had history with the O'Connors, some good, most complicated. She learned how to read a room, how to identify threats before they became violence, how to negotiate without showing desperation, how to lie with her face while telling the truth with her words. And she learned how to be ruthless. Crispin was a patient teacher, but a merciless one. He put her in situations designed to break her: meetings with men who propositioned her, business deals where she was expected to fail, social events where she was mocked as the gardener's daughter playing dress-up. Every time she stumbled, he made her do it again until she got it right. Pierce was with her through all of it, silent and watchful, a shadow that never left her side. He didn't touch her except when necessary, didn't push for more than she was willing to give, just stood close enough that she could feel his presence like a shield between her and the world. At night, they'd sit in the estate library while Kiara read through files on her family's business. Decades of records showing exactly what the O'Connors had built and what the Gallaghers had taken. Pierce would drink whiskey and watch her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're different," he said one night. Kiara looked up from a spreadsheet. "Different how?" "Harder, colder." He set down his glass. "When I met you in the gardens, you were soft, kind. You'd apologize to plants if you pruned them wrong. That girl was built on lies. That girl was real." Pierce moved to sit across from her. "This person you're becoming, this ruthless version who can negotiate with criminals without flinching, I'm not sure she's you."
Maybe she's who I was always supposed to be. Maybe the gardens were the lie, and this is the truth. Kiara closed the file. "Does it scare you?" "Yes." "Good. It should." She met his eyes. "Because I'm not done changing. By the time I'm finished, I'm going to be the kind of person my parents were, the kind who can make impossible choices and live with the consequences." "What if I don't recognize you when you're done?" Kiara stood, walked around the desk until she was standing in front of him. Pierce looked up at her, something vulnerable in his expression that made her chest ache. "Then you'll have to decide," she said quietly, "if you can love who I'm becoming, or if you're still in love with who I used to be." She left before he could answer. The 3 months ended on a Tuesday. Kiara woke that morning knowing something had shifted. She could feel it in her bones, the sense that she'd crossed some invisible threshold and there was no going back. Crispin called a meeting, not at the estate. At the Shelbourne Hotel in downtown Dublin, neutral ground where the city's families could gather without it being seen as choosing sides. The official reason was to introduce Kiara O'Connor to Dublin's elite, to formally acknowledge her as the O'Connor heir and negotiate the separation of assets from Gallagher Holdings. The real reason was to draw out everyone who wanted her dead. "They'll come," Crispin said, reviewing the security arrangements. "Walsh's allies, people who profited from the O'Connor collapse, anyone who sees you as a threat to the power structure that's been in place for 19 years. They'll come because they need to assess whether you're real or just a figurehead. And when they realize I'm real, some will try to make alliances. Some will try to intimidate you, and some," he paused, "some will try to kill you. Probably not at the hotel, too public, but after, when you're vulnerable. Let them try." Kiara straightened her jacket, designer, expensive, armor disguised as clothing. "I'm ready." Pierce appeared in the doorway. He wore a suit that probably cost more than a car, his hair slicked back, looking every inch the Gallagher heir. But his eyes were on Kiara, intense and worried. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do." "No, you could take the money and disappear. Live somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. You don't owe Dublin anything." "I owe my parents everything." Kiara moved toward him. "They died so I could live. I'm not going to honor that sacrifice by hiding. I'm going to finish what they started." Pierce's hands came up, cupped her face. "Then I'm with you. Whatever happens. However this ends. Even if it ends badly, especially then." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I love you, Kiara O'Connor.
I've loved you since you were 17 and cursing at wisteria, and I'll love you when you're 60 and running this city like a queen. Nothing you become will change that." Kiara's throat tightened. "I can't promise I'll survive this." "I know. I can't promise I won't become someone you don't recognize." "I know that too." Pierce's thumb brushed her cheekbone. "But I'm gambling on you anyway, because you're the best bet I've ever made." Kiara kissed him, hard and desperate and full of all the fear she wouldn't let show anywhere else. When she pulled back, Pierce's eyes were bright. "Don't die tonight," he said. "I'll do my best." They drove to the Shelbourne in separate cars. Security protocol. Harder to take them both out if they weren't together. Kiara sat in the back of an armored sedan while Marcus drove, watching Dublin slide past the tinted windows. The hotel was magnificent, all Georgian elegance and old money. Reporters crowded the entrance, cameras flashing. They'd leaked the meeting to the press deliberately. Witnesses made assassination harder. Kiara stepped out of the car, and the flashes intensified. Questions shouted from all sides. She ignored them, climbed the steps with Marcus flanking her, and walked into the hotel's grand ballroom like she owned it. She didn't own it yet, but she would. The room fell silent when she entered. 50 people, maybe more, all turning to stare. Dublin's elite. The families who controlled the city's pulse. They'd come to see the ghost made flesh, to assess whether the O'Connor heir was a threat or a curiosity. Kiara met their stares without flinching, scanned the room, located exits, identified potential threats. Crispin had taught her well. Then she saw him, standing near the back of the room, champagne in hand, smiling like the cat that ate the canary. Michael Delaney, Walsh's lawyer. Her lawyer now, supposedly. The man who'd helped her record Walsh's confession. But his eyes were cold. And the man beside him, tall, scarred, familiar from security briefings, was Liam Burke, Walsh's lieutenant, the man who'd planted the bomb, the man Pierce had beaten half to death weeks ago. Burke was out of the hospital, and he was here. Kiara's blood went cold. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a trap. She turned to find Pierce, but he was across the room, talking to someone she didn't recognize, too far away. Marcus was beside her, but he was watching the main entrance, not the back where Burke stood. Delaney's smile widened. He raised his glass in a mock salute. Then the lights went out, screams erupted, glass shattered. Kiara dropped to the floor on instinct, heart hammering. Someone grabbed her arm, hard enough to bruise, and dragged her sideways. "Don't fight," a voice hissed in her ear. Not Burke, someone else. "Or everyone in this room dies." Kiara went rigid. "What do you want?" "Walsh wants you dead, but I want you alive. For now." The grip tightened. "So you're going to come with me quietly, and if you scream, if you fight, if you do anything except exactly what I say..." A gun pressed against her ribs. "I start shooting, and I don't miss." Emergency lights kicked on, dim and red. In their glow, Kiara saw chaos. People running, security trying to maintain order, Pierce shoving through the crowd, his face white with terror, scanning for her. She met his eyes across the room, and then the man holding her pulled her through a service door, and Pierce disappeared from view. The door slammed shut, locked. Kiara was shoved down a hallway, service corridor, concrete walls, no witnesses. Her mind raced. Options. Weapons. Ways to fight. But the gun stayed pressed against her ribs, and the man holding her was strong enough to break her if she tried anything stupid. They emerged into an alley behind the hotel. A van waited, engine running. The side door slid open. "Get in." Kiara didn't move. "Who sent you?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." The man laughed. "Walsh sends his regards. Even from prison, he's got reach. And he's got friends who want you gone as much as he does. I recorded his confession. The whole world knows he killed your parents. But they don't know about the secondary targets. The other families he was planning to hit after the O'Connors fell. The alliances he was going to break." The gun dug deeper. "You think Walsh was working alone? He had partners, politicians, businessmen, people who profited from the chaos. And you..." He shoved her toward the van. "You're threatening to expose all of it." Kiara's mind clicked through possibilities. Stalling tactics, escape routes. The alley was empty. No witnesses. If she got in that van, she was dead. So she made a choice. She stopped resisting, went limp, let her knees buckle. The man's grip loosened for half a second, just long enough. Kiara drove her elbow back into his throat. Hard. Felt cartilage crunch. The man choked, stumbled. The gun went off, loud as a cannon in the enclosed space, but the shot went wide. Kiara ran, feet pounding on pavement, lungs burning. Behind her, shouting. More footsteps. The van's engine revving. She burst out of the alley onto a main street. Traffic, pedestrians, light, witnesses, safety. A black Bentley screeched to a stop beside her. The door flew open. Pierce, get in! Kiara dove into the car. Pierce hit the gas before she'd even closed the door. They rocketed through Dublin streets, running red lights, taking corners too fast, while behind them the van tried to follow. What the fuck happened? Pierce's voice was raw with terror and fury. Trap. Walsh has people on the outside. They were waiting, but Kiara looked back. The van was gaining. Pierce, I know. He yanked the steering wheel, sending them down a narrow side street. Hold on. What followed was 3 minutes of the most terrifying driving Kiara had ever experienced. Pierce drove like a man possessed, taking shortcuts through pedestrian areas, mounting sidewalks, threading between stopped cars with inches to spare. The van stayed on them, relentless. Then Pierce did something insane. He aimed the Bentley at the River Liffey. Pierce, trust me, he floored it. The car launched off a low embankment, flew through the air for a heart-stopping second, and crashed down onto the riverside walkway. Metal screamed. The engine made a horrible grinding noise. But they were moving, and behind them, the van couldn't follow. Too heavy, too wide for the narrow path. Pierce drove along the river for half a mile before pulling into a parking garage and killing the engine. They sat in darkness, both breathing hard, while adrenaline slowly drained from Kiara's veins. You're bleeding, Pierce said finally. Kiara looked down. Her arm was cut, probably from broken glass when she dove into the car. Blood soaked through her jacket sleeve. It's not bad. Let me see. He reached for her and Kiara flinched, not from pain, from the sudden overwhelming certainty that this was never going to end. Walsh's people would keep coming. The families who wanted her dead would keep trying. She could run or fight or hide, but eventually... Kiara. Pierce's hands cupped her face. Look at me. She met his eyes. We're going to finish this, he said. Tonight. No more waiting. No more playing defense. We're going after every single person who helped Walsh, every politician he bribed, every family who profited from your parents' death, and we're going to burn them all down. How? Pierce's smile was cold, vicious. We give them exactly what they're afraid of. We stop being the victims and become the threat. We make the O'Connor name mean something again, something terrifying. Kiara stared at him. At this beautiful, dangerous man who'd driven through Dublin like a demon to save her, who'd chosen her over his own family, who was offering her war wrapped in bloody promises. All right, she said, let's burn it down. Pierce kissed her, fierce and claiming and full of dark promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were alight with something that looked like madness. Welcome to the family business, Kiara O'Connor. Let's show Dublin what happens when you wake a ghost. They drove back toward the city center, toward the Shelbourne Hotel, toward whatever ending waited in Dublin's glittering darkness. And behind them, the Liffey flowed on, dark and cold and utterly indifferent to the violence about to be unleashed on its shores. The war Declan and Claire O'Connor died to prevent was finally beginning. And this time, their daughter was going to finish it. The Shelbourne Hotel was still chaos when they returned. Police cars blocked the street, their blue lights painting the Georgian facade in stuttering color. Ambulances lined the curb. Paramedics worked on injuries, mostly minor, panic-induced crushes and falls. But 3 bodies lay covered with sheets near the entrance. Collateral damage from the attack. Kiara stared at those shapes through the Bentley's windshield. 3 people dead because she'd walked into a room. 3 families destroyed because Walsh's reach extended beyond prison walls. This isn't your fault, Pierce said quietly. Isn't it? Kiara's voice was hollow. I'm the one who forced this confrontation. I'm the one who wanted to reclaim the O'Connor name publicly. Those people died because I refused to stay hidden. Those people died because Walsh is a murderer who can't let go of power.
Pierce's hand found hers. You didn't pull the trigger. You're not responsible for violence committed by men who'd kill whether you existed or not. But Kiara could feel the weight of those bodies like stones in her chest. She'd wanted to finish this, wanted justice, wanted to honor her parents' sacrifice by becoming strong enough to survive their world. Instead, she'd created more corpses.
We can leave, Pierce said. Right now. Drive to the airport. Disappear. Let my father handle the cleanup. No. Kiara opened the car door. We finished this. Tonight. She stepped out into Dublin's cold night air. The cut on her arm throbbed. Her ears still rang from the gunshot in the alley. But she walked toward the hotel entrance with her spine straight, head high, every step deliberate. Detective Brennan met her at the door, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, the one who'd taken her statement after Walsh's arrest. Miss O'Connor, you're bleeding. I'm fine. You were targeted. We have witnesses saying you were dragged from the ballroom during the blackout.
I fought back. Kiara met his eyes. The man who grabbed me, late 30s, scar through his left eyebrow, Irish accent.
He's working for Walsh. He mentioned secondary targets, other families Walsh planned to destroy after mine fell. Brennan's expression sharpened. You're saying Walsh had accomplices? I'm saying Walsh had partners. People in legitimate businesses and government who profited from the O'Connor collapse. And they're terrified I'll expose them. Kiara pulled out her phone. I recorded everything he said. Audio quality isn't great, but it's enough to start investigating. She handed him the phone. Brennan listened, his face going progressively darker. When the recording ended, he looked at Kiara with something like respect.
You're collecting evidence in the middle of being kidnapped? Seemed like a good time. Kiara smiled without humor. Do we have enough for warrants? Possibly. But Miss O'Connor... Brennan hesitated. Going after this kind of conspiracy? These aren't street criminals. These are people with resources, lawyers, political connections. They'll fight you in ways that make Walsh look simple. Good, I'm done with simple. Kiara took back her phone. How long until you can move on this?
48 hours. Maybe less if I can get a judge to expedite. He studied her. You should leave Dublin until then. Go somewhere secure. Let us do our jobs. Kiara looked past him at the ballroom doors. Through the glass, she could see Crispin talking to uniformed officers. Marcus was coordinating security, and scattered throughout the crowd were faces she recognized from her 3 months of study. The families, the politicians, the people who'd come to assess whether she was real. They'd gotten their answer tonight. She was real. And she was dangerous enough that someone had tried to kill her in a room full of witnesses. I'm not leaving, she said. If I run now, everyone in that room will think I'm weak, that I can be scared off. I stay. I finish my business, and I make sure every person who came here tonight understands that the O'Connor name isn't just a memory anymore. Brennan sighed. You're as stubborn as your father was. You knew him? Worked a case with him years ago, back when I was young and stupid enough to think criminals and cops couldn't cooperate. He taught me better. Brennan's expression softened. Declan O'Connor was a hard man, but fair. He kept his word. That mattered in this city, still does. Kiara felt something shift in her chest. Thank you. Brennan nodded once. Be careful, Miss O'Connor. The men who killed your parents, they're still out there, and they're watching. He left to coordinate with other officers. Kiara stood alone on the hotel steps, watching emergency vehicles depart one by one. The bodies had been taken away. The witnesses dispersed. Soon the street would be empty again, and Dublin would pretend nothing had happened. But Kiara would remember, would carry the weight of tonight like she carried everything else. Her parents' sacrifice, Peter's lies, Pierce's guilt, the fortune built on blood. Pierce appeared beside her. My father wants to see you, upstairs, private suite. Just me? Both of us. Pierce's jaw was tight. He's furious and scared. That's a bad combination. They took a service elevator to the 4th floor. The suite was elegant, all cream and gold, with windows overlooking the city. Crispin stood by those windows, hands clasped behind his back, looking every inch the crime lord he was. Sit, he said without turning. Kiara remained standing. I'm fine here. Crispin turned. His face was carved from ice. 3 people are dead. My security failed. And you, he pointed at her like she was evidence. You drew out every enemy the O'Connors ever made and nearly got killed in the process. So no, you're not fine. And we're going to have a conversation about what happens next.
What happens next, Kiara said calmly, is I take control of the O'Connor assets. All of them. Today. I'm done waiting for your approval or your timeline. You've had 19 years to manage my inheritance. That ends now. Crispin's eyes narrowed. You're not ready. I survived a kidnapping attempt. I recorded evidence against Walsh's accomplices. I walked back into this hotel after someone tried to drag me into a van. How much more ready do I need to be?
Ready enough to understand that taking control means accepting responsibility. Not just for the money and power, but for the people who depend on O'Connor businesses. The legitimate workers, the families who've built their lives on infrastructure your grandfather created. Crispin stepped closer. You want to burn down everyone connected to Walsh? Fine. But understand that you'll destroy innocent lives in the process. That's what power costs in this world.
I know the cost.
Kiara's voice went quiet. My parents paid it. Peter paid it. I've been paying it since the night I saw Pierce kill someone in your garden. So don't lecture me about responsibility. I've been living with the consequences of other people's choices my entire life. Now I'm making my own. And if those choices get you killed,
then I die. But I die as Kiara O'Connor, not as someone's gardener daughter, not as a ghost, as myself. She met his eyes. Sign over the assets. Today. Or I go to the press with everything. The recording of my parents, the theft of my inheritance, the fact that you've been profiting from their sacrifice for 19 years. Let Dublin decide whether the Gallaghers are heroes or vultures.
The silence stretched taut. Pierce stood frozen between them, looking like he wanted to intervene, but didn't know whose side to take. Finally, Crispin smiled. It was a terrible thing, cold and sharp and almost proud. You really are Declan's daughter. So I've heard. All right, you want it? Take it. But understand, the moment those assets transfer to your name, you become a target for every criminal organization in Europe. The O'Connor fortune is worth billions, and every cent of it is now yours to protect, or lose. He pulled out his phone. I'll have my lawyers draw up the papers. You'll sign them tomorrow. And then, Miss O'Connor, you're on your own. Kiara nodded. Good. Crispin looked at Pierce. And you? Where do you stand in this? Pierce's eyes stayed on Kiara. With her, wherever that leads. Even if it means going against me? Especially then. Pierce's voice was iron. You taught me loyalty, Dad. But you also taught me that sometimes the right thing and the smart thing aren't the same. Kiara's doing the right thing. So I'm with her. Something flickered across Crispin's face. Pain, maybe, or regret. Then I hope you both survive what comes next. He left without another word.
Kiara's legs suddenly felt like water. She sank onto the suite's couch, adrenaline finally draining away. Pierce sat beside her, close enough to touch but not touching, waiting for permission. I'm terrified, Kiara said quietly. I know. I have no idea what I'm doing. Nobody does. Not really. We're all just making it up as we go and hoping we don't destroy everything we love in the process. Pierce's hand found hers. But Kiara, if anyone can survive this world, it's you. You're stronger than your father, smarter than my father, and stubborn enough to outlast everyone who wants you dead. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. Pierce laughed, raw and genuine. No, but it's the truth. Kiara leaned against him, let herself feel the warmth of him, the solid reality of his presence. They sat like that for a long time, watching Dublin's lights glitter beyond the windows. What happens after? She asked eventually. After what? After I take control of the O'Connor fortune, after we expose Walsh's partners. After all this is done, what happens to us?
Pierce was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I want to say we ride off into the sunset and live happily ever after, but that's not our world. Our world is complicated and bloody and full of people who'll keep trying to tear us apart. He shifted to look at her. But I'm willing to fight for it anyway. For you, for whatever future we can build from these ashes. Even if that future is ugly, especially then. Pierce pulled her closer. I love you, Kiara O'Connor. I love your strength and your rage and the way you refuse to stay down no matter how many times this city tries to break you. So yes, even if our future is ugly and violent and nothing like a fairy tale, I want it. I want you." Kiara kissed him, slow and deep and full of all the words she didn't know how to say. When she pulled back, Pierce's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Don't make me regret this," she whispered. "I'll try not to." He smiled. "But no promises. I'm a Gallagher. We're genetically predisposed to fucking things up." Kiara laughed despite everything, despite the bodies, despite the fear, despite knowing that tomorrow she'd sign papers making her one of the wealthiest and most hunted people in Ireland. For tonight, she could just be a 19-year-old girl sitting in a hotel suite with the man she loved, pretending the world outside didn't want them dead. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The papers arrived the next morning. Thick stacks of legal documents outlining the transfer of O'Connor assets from Gallagher control back to Kiara. Properties, bank accounts, business interests, shares in companies she'd never heard of, a fortune so vast it made her head spin. She signed them in Crispin's office while lawyers witnessed. Peter stood in the corner watching with an expression that mixed pride and terror. Pierce sat beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back, steady and warm. When the last signature was done, Crispin slid the papers into a folder. "It's done. You're now one of the wealthiest people in Ireland. Congratulations."
The word felt obscene. Kiara stared at her hands, the same hands that had pruned roses 3 months ago, that had been covered in dirt and calluses. Now they'd just signed documents worth billions. "What now?" she asked. "Now you learn what it means to have power, real power. The kind that changes lives with a phone call. The kind that makes politicians nervous and criminals respectful." Crispin leaned back in his chair. "You wanted this, Miss O'Connor. Make sure you can live with it."
Kiara stood. "I will, but not the way you did. I'm not going to hoard this fortune or use it to build an empire on other people's suffering. I'm going to do something my parents would have wanted, something that actually helps people instead of just moving money between criminals." "Idealistic. Your father said the same thing at your age." Crispin smiled sadly. "Let's see if you still believe it in 20 years. "I will." Kiara walked to the door. "Because unlike you, I remember what it's like to have nothing, to be invisible, to watch people with power and money treat the world like it exists for their entertainment. I'm not going to become that." She left before he could respond. Peter caught up with her in the hallway. "Kiara, wait." She stopped, turned. "What?" "I'm proud of you." His voice was thick. "Your mother would be proud too. You're becoming exactly the woman she hoped you'd be."
Kiara's throat tightened. "I barely remember her." "That's all right. She's in you anyway. In the way you fight, the way you refuse to break, the way you look at the world like it owes you answers." Peter smiled. "You're Claire O'Connor's daughter. That's worth more than any fortune." "Dad?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. Old habit. Old comfort. Peter's eyes went bright. "Yeah, kiddo? Thank you. For everything. For raising me. For keeping me safe. For loving me even when you didn't have to." Kiara stepped closer. "I know I've been angry and hurt, and I know I said terrible things, but you're my father. Maybe not by blood, but by every way that matters."
Peter pulled her into a hug, careful of her injured arm, gentle, like she was still the 3-year-old he'd pulled from wreckage 19 years ago. Kiara buried her face against his shoulder and let herself cry, for her parents, for the childhood she'd lost, for the impossible weight of everything she'd inherited. "You're going to do great things," Peter whispered. "I know it. Or I'll fail spectacularly and lose everything. Even then, you'll be great." He pulled back to look at her. "Because you're not defined by success or failure, Kiara. You're defined by the fact that you keep getting up, keep fighting, keep choosing to be better than the world expects." She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel like she was ready for what came next, but mostly she just felt exhausted and scared and desperately in over her head. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted. "Nobody does. That's the secret everyone's afraid to admit." Peter squeezed her shoulders. "But you've got good people around you. Pierce, Sadi, me. We'll help you figure it out."
Kiara nodded. Okay. Okay. Peter smiled. Now go. You've got a city to save or destroy, or whatever you young people do with fortunes these days.
She left him in the hallway, walked downstairs to where Pierce waited with the car. They drove through Dublin in silence, both processing the weight of what had just happened. "Where to?" Pierce asked finally.
Kiara looked out the window at the city. Her city now, in a way it hadn't been before. Every building, every street, every corner held pieces of her family's history. Her grandfather had built the docks. Her father had expanded the shipping routes. Her mother had opened the restaurants and import businesses that employed thousands. And now it was hers. All of it. To protect or destroy. To honor or abandon. "The cemetery," she said. "I need to see them."
St. Michael's Cemetery was quiet in the afternoon light. Old headstones stood like crooked teeth among overgrown grass. Pierce walked behind Kiara, giving her space but staying close enough to matter. She found the plot easily. 3 names carved into black marble. Declan O'Connor, beloved husband and father. Claire O'Connor, beloved wife and mother. Kiara O'Connor, forever in our hearts. Kiara stared at her own name, at the lie that had kept her alive for 19 years, at the proof that sometimes the best way to protect someone was to make the world believe they were already dead. "Hi," she said quietly. "I'm sorry it took so long to visit. I didn't know who I was, where to find you. But I know now, and Her voice cracked. "I know what you did. I know you chose to die so I could live, so Pierce could live, so Dublin wouldn't burn." The wind moved through nearby trees. Somewhere, a bird sang. "I hope I'm making you proud," Kiara continued. "I took back our fortune. I'm going after the people who helped Walsh destroy you, and I'm trying, really trying, to be the kind of person who deserves the sacrifice you made." She wiped her eyes. "But I'm scared. I'm terrified I'll mess this up, that I'll waste the life you gave me, that I'll become exactly the kind of person you died fighting against." Pierce's hand found her shoulder, gentle, grounding. "But I'm going to try," Kiara said. "I'm going to use this fortune for something good. I'm going to help people the way you helped people. And I'm going to make sure your names, the real story of who you were and what you chose, that gets told properly. Not as victims, as heroes who saw what needed to be done and did it anyway." She knelt, pressed her palm against the cold marble. "I love you, both of you, and I wish—" Her throat closed. "I wish I'd had more time, but I'll honor the time you gave me, I promise." She stayed there for a long time, crying into the grass, while Pierce stood guard and the Dublin sky moved toward dusk. When she finally stood, her knees were muddy and her face was swollen, but something in her chest felt lighter. "Thank you," she said to Pierce. "For what? For bringing me here? For standing with me? For not trying to fix this or make it easier?" She took his hand. "For just being here." Pierce pulled her close. "Always." They walked back to the car as the sun set, painting Dublin's sky in shades of gold and red. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Kiara felt something that might have been peace. 3 months later, Kiara stood in front of reporters outside a newly opened medical clinic in Dublin's north side. The building had been abandoned for years, another victim of budget cuts and neglect. Now it gleamed with fresh paint and new equipment, funded by O'Connor money. "My parents believed in taking care of the people who built this city," Kiara said into the microphones. "The workers, the families, the people who don't make headlines but keep Dublin running. This clinic is the first of many projects designed to honor that belief. Free healthcare, addiction services, mental health support, all funded by the O'Connor Foundation." Questions shouted from all sides. She answered them calmly, professionally. 3 months of practice had made her good at this, presenting the image of a competent heir rather than the terrified 19-year-old she still felt like inside. But she was getting better, learning, growing into the name she'd inherited. Walsh's trial had started 2 weeks ago. Kiara testified, walking the jury through the recording of his confession. Watching him sit in that defendant's chair, diminished, powerless, stripped of everything that made him dangerous, had been its own kind of justice. His accomplices were next. Detective Brennan's investigation had uncovered a network of corruption spanning 3 decades. Politicians, businessmen, criminals who'd profited from the O'Connor collapse. Warrants had been issued, arrests made. The whole rotten structure was coming down piece by piece. It wouldn't bring her parents back. Wouldn't erase 19 years of lies. But it was something. After the press conference, Kiara met Sadi for coffee. Her best friend looked at her across the table with an expression that mixed awe and concern. "You're different," Sadi said. "I know. Not bad different, just harder. Like you've got armor now." "I do." Kiara stirred her coffee. "You can't survive this world without it, but I'm trying not to let the armor become who I am. Trying to remember the person I was before all this." The girl in the gardens. "Yeah." Kiara smiled sadly. "She feels like a lifetime ago." "She's still in there. I can see her sometimes. When you think nobody's watching." Sadie reached across the table, squeezed Kiara's hand. "Don't lose her completely. The world needs people who remember what it's like to be invisible." "I won't," Kiara squeezed back. "I promise." They talked about normal things after that. Sadi's job, her terrible dating life, gossip about mutual friends. For an hour, Kiara got to pretend she was just a 19-year-old girl having coffee with her best friend, and it felt like oxygen. Pierce picked her up afterward. He'd been working with Crispin to separate the remaining Gallagher and O'Connor business interests, a complicated process that would probably take years to fully untangle. But they were making progress. "How was Sadi?" he asked. "Good. Worried about me. Thinks I'm getting too hard." "Are you?" Kiara considered. "Maybe. But I don't know how else to survive this." Pierce pulled the car over. They were near the docks, the same waterfront her grandfather had controlled, that her father had expanded, that now belonged to her. He turned to face her, expression serious. "You don't have to survive it alone," he said. "I know I've said it before, but I mean it, Kiara. Whatever you're carrying, whatever weight you think you have to bear by yourself, share it. Let me help. I don't want to make you responsible for my choices. Too late. I'm already responsible. I'm in love with you. That means your choices are mine too. Your wars are my wars. Your victories are mine to celebrate, and your failures are mine to help fix." He cupped her face. "We're in this together, for real, for always. If you'll have me." Kiara's throat tightened. "Even knowing what it costs? Especially knowing that." Pierce smiled. "I've spent my entire life watching people make safe choices and ending up miserable. I'd rather take the dangerous road with you than the safe one alone." "That's stupid." "Probably, but it's my brand of stupid." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "So, Kiara O'Connor, will you marry me? Not because it's strategic or because it merges our families or any of that bullshit, just because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." Kiara stared at the box. At the ring inside, simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry she'd expected. "Pierce, you can say no. We can wait. We can—" "Yes." The word came out sure and steady. "Yes, I'll marry you." Pierce's face transformed. He pulled her across the console, kissed her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. And for a few perfect moments, Kiara forgot about fortunes and enemies and the weight of names. She was just a girl kissing the man she loved in a car by the Dublin docks. It was enough. The wedding happened 6 months later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Sadi was maid of honor. Marcus stood up as Pierce's best man. Peter walked Kiara down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. And Crispin Gallagher sat in the front row, watching his son marry the daughter of the man who died in his place. And if there was guilt in his expression, he hid it well. Kiara wore white, not because of tradition, but because she wanted to reclaim the image of the girl bleeding in that ruined dress on a Dublin roadside. She wanted to prove that endings could be rewritten, that the girl who entered Pierce Gallagher's car could survive everything this world threw at her and come out the other side not broken, but transformed. "I do," she said when the officiant asked. And she meant it. Pierce kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission. The small crowd applauded. And somewhere in the Dublin sky, Kiara imagined her parents watching. Proud. At peace. knowing their sacrifice hadn't been wasted. The reception was at the Gallagher estate, the same grounds where Kiara had spent 19 years invisible. But this time she walked those gardens as herself, as an O'Connor, as Pierce Gallagher's wife, as someone who belonged. She found Peter in the rose garden later, standing among the plants they'd tended together for years. "You did good work here," she said. Peter smiled. "We did good work. You were always the one with the gift. I just provided the tools." "That's not true, isn't it?" He gestured at the roses, perfect blooms in shades of crimson and cream. "You made these beautiful because you cared about them, saw them as living things worth nurturing. That's who you are, Kiara. Someone who sees value in things other people overlook." "Even in you?" she asked gently. "Especially in me." Peter's voice was rough. "I was just a driver who got lucky, who happened to be there the night you needed saving. But you made me a father, gave me purpose, made me better than I ever would have been alone." Kiara hugged him. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, kiddo." He pulled back, wiping his eyes. "Now go. Dance with your husband. Eat cake. Be young and happy. You've earned it." She found Pierce on the terrace, talking with Marcus. When he saw her, his face lit up, that particular expression reserved just for her, like she was the only person in a room full of people who mattered. "Dance with me?" she asked. "Always." They moved to the garden where a string quartet played something slow and sweet. Pierce's arms came around her, solid and warm. They swayed together while Dublin's stars appeared overhead. "Happy?" Pierce asked. Kiara thought about it, about everything she'd gained and lost, about the fortune she'd inherited and the family she'd discovered, about the girl she'd been and the woman she was becoming. "Getting there," she said honestly. "Ask me again in a year." "I will. Every day if you want. Until the answer is yes without qualification." "That might take a while." "I've got time." Pierce pulled her closer. "I've got the rest of my life to make you happy, Kiara Gallagher, and I plan to use every second." Kiara laughed, real and genuine and full of something that felt almost like joy. "Gallagher, that's going to take some getting used to. You could have kept O'Connor." "No, I'm both now. O'Connor by blood, Gallagher by choice. That feels right." She looked up at him. "Besides, if we're going to rebuild this city together, we might as well do it under one name. Ambitious. You married an O'Connor. Ambition comes with the territory." Pierce kissed her forehead. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They danced until the music stopped, until the guests departed, until it was just the two of them standing in the gardens while Dublin slept below. And Kiara O'Connor Gallagher, the girl who'd been invisible, who'd been erased, who'd been told she was worth nothing, stood in the ruins of her old life and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope. Not the naive kind that believes everything will be easy, but the hard-earned kind that understands the world is brutal and complicated and full of people who will keep trying to tear you down. The kind that says, "I've survived everything you threw at me. I'm still standing, and I'm not done fighting yet." 19 years ago, Declan and Claire O'Connor had made an impossible choice. They'd walked into death deliberately, with open eyes, to give their daughter a future worth living. And Kiara, standing in the gardens with her husband's hand in hers, with her father watching from the shadows, with the weight of her inheritance finally feeling like possibility instead of burden, understood something her parents had known all along. The most powerful thing she'd inherited wasn't the money or the properties or the O'Connor name. It was the ability to choose who she would become next. Not the victim of violence, not the puppet of powerful men, not the ghost haunting Dublin's conscience, but herself. Flawed and fierce and still learning, still fighting, still refusing to let this world define her worth. The girl who entered Pierce Gallagher's car 3 years ago was gone. She died in that warehouse with Walsh's confession. Been reborn in that hotel when she chose to fight instead of hide. Transformed again with every choice, every battle, every moment she refused to break. And the woman standing in her place? She was exactly who Kiara O'Connor was always meant to be. Scared, stubborn, scarred, but unbreakable. And ready, finally, impossibly ready, to live.